Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. We're getting the band back together with one substitution. It's March 9th, 2025, and we are here to talk about the new Lori Vallow interview on Dateline with Keith Morrison. The interview was called The Disturbing Case of Lori Vallow, and joining us on this Sunday morning is the band, Sans Mindy. So we've got Lauren Mathias. Hey, Lauren.
Hey.
Lauren, of course, you are joining us from Hidden True Crime YouTube channel and podcast. How are you feeling this Sunday morning?
Hanging in there. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us on last minute notice.
Absolutely.
We also have Megan Connor, cousin of Lori Vallow, from Third Verse / Midlife Revolution. Hey, Megan.
Hey, how's it going?
Did you have a what's it called? A daylight savings nightmare this morning?
I did. I had a nightmare early this morning that I woke up too late to get ready for the episode. And then I woke up and it was an hour later and the dream came true.
Well, glad you could join us. And
thanks for having me.
And Mindy, you've changed. That was a joke, Gerardo. No, Mindy, we always joke we're getting the band back together. Do we have an official band name yet?
I don't know.
So many nominations.
There were some good ones. Yeah. Keep them coming. I like them so much. I don't want to pick one because I just want to keep reading all the suggestions. They're so clever.
All right. So viewers and listeners, if you want to name the band, we're still taking votes. But Mindy is on a family vacation. But we are never disappointed to have Gerardo Samano with us. Gerardo, you're into true crime and you're into legal stuff, and you've been following this case from the beginning. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I was actually, I've said this before, but I was actually in Rexburg, living in Rexburg when all of these events were happening.
Yeah. So it's going to be fun. Yeah. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, this interview dropped for me. It was Sunday night. Was it 7 p.m. Utah time? Is that right?
Yes, I believe that.
And it's
Friday night. Yeah.
Friday night. What did I say? Last night? Friday night?
You said Sunday.
Okay. Dang, my brain. So Friday night, 2-hour interview dropped. I was super excited to hear, what it was going to be about. Megan, since you are literally Lori Vallow's cousin, you grew up with her, you knew her. Why don't we have you start by just telling us your reactions sort of when you heard that this is going to happen and what you were hoping for and anything you want to say leading up to actually watching it. Is that all right?
Sure. Yeah.
And before I do that, we would like to ask everybody to please like this episode. Please subscribe to this channel. And while you're at it, please subscribe to Hidden True Crime YouTube channel and Midlife Revolution or Third Verse YouTube channel as well. It turns out that comments and likes really help us grow our channels. So please do that, everyone. And with that, and of course, if you want to provide, those of you who are joining us on the live stream, we're always grateful for our monthly donors. They're our bread and butter. So thank you, monthly donors, for your donations. If you're on the live chat and you want to make sure we see and read your comment or question, super chats are the best way to do that. Okay, over to you, Megan.
Okay, so yeah, I was actually at Thrive in St. George when I found out that this interview was going to happen. I believe that it was Saturday morning of last week, and I was actually with Maven, Crusha K. Easton, who is Kay and Larry Woodcock's daughter, sent me a text, and it was a post from her channel that she was posting about the interview happening. And I think I had a little bit of a frustrated outburst. I'm always frustrated and angry and upset when Lori is grabbing more attention and more spotlight. So I think my initial reaction was really, why Dateline? Why do we have to give her more of a platform? But very quickly, of course, I understand, Dateline probably has wanted to interview her for a long time. I know she's wanted to go on Dateline for a long time. And, they are taking advantage of an opportunity just ahead of her trial, which I think is, of course, it's an advantageous time for them to do it. So I understand. I was grateful in retrospect for the way it was treated. We can talk about that later. But just initially, my reaction was anger and frustration, followed by understanding for Dateline, and also at least a hope that we would get a little bit of a glimpse into where Lori's head is at now, which I think we did. And, then just sort of formulating over time what I thought she might talk about. And I think it became pretty obvious to me, as it probably did to most everyone, that she wanted to put out this narrative, the same one that she told Colby on the phone call that Colby recorded with her, where she blames everything on Tylee. And I think she commented on this in the interview that she doesn't really know exactly what's being said about her and what's really out there in the press and the media. So she probably doesn't know that everybody has heard that phone call, or at least everyone following the case has heard Colby's thoughts on it, has heard my thoughts on it, has heard Crush's thoughts on it, has heard Hidden True Crime's thoughts on it. We've all kind of already commented on that narrative. So didn't expect there to be a whole lot of new information, all there was a little bit. So yeah, those were just my initial thoughts. I was grateful to be able to listen to the interview with my channel members, with my little community that I've grown over there at Third Verse, and to have just supportive people around me to help me get through that, because otherwise it would have been pretty difficult. So I was grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks. We always have to check ourselves, because there is such a fascination with this. It is such an interesting story. It's a national story. But we're talking about real people. We're talking about the death of 2 children. We're talking about so many family members impacted by this. And Megan, you're closer to all of that than any of us here, for sure. So that's why we're so grateful to have you on. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's always tough, being pretty much the only family member speaking publicly with the lens of having left Mormonism. So I think seeing the family and being out of the family too, kind of distanced from everyone, seeing the family for what it is, seeing the religion for what it is, and speaking openly about it. It's a lonely place sometimes, and it certainly is not something I ever thought I was going to have to deal with, but I'm trying to make the best of it by talking about how we can have healthier families and healthier religions and healthier relationships.
Yeah, well, thank you. Julie wants me to mention that this is the 2000th Mormon Stories podcast episode. So it's kind of a fun anniversary of sorts. So Lauren and Megan and Gerardo, I couldn't think of 3 people that I'd rather have on for our 2000th episode.
I am honored.
Awesome.
That is a really, really big deal.
Yeah,
so congratulations to Mormon Stories, and
yeah,
I am flattered.
Yeah.
And again, thanks to everyone joining us. So Lauren, you were saying before we started today that this is you'll probably know more about this case than any case you ever cover. Before we dive into actually our reactions to this episode, do you want to share your thoughts and feelings once you found out this was going to happen and watched the trailers and everything? I'd love to hear your insights.
Yeah. I was privileged to learn that this was happening quite a while ago, months ago.
Oh yeah, you were interviewed. You were interviewed for it.
Well, I was interviewed. I also was
yeah.
I was talking to the producer. I knew the very day it was happening. I knew the moment it was happening. I knew before Keith went in, and I knew after. And I actually knew the soundbite about Dancing with the Stars. We got the inside info from Shane Bishop. He is the producer of all of the Daybell Datelines. So he was keeping us posted, and it was a fascinating sort of behind the scenes process that we learned was going on. And then yes, they came out and they actually interviewed us for a different episode. But while we were with Keith, he asked us questions, because I can genuinely say that Keith had a lot of questions after interviewing Lori. I think the reactions we saw with Keith Morrison there were real. They were unscripted. Like, he was very frustrated in that interview, and it was a difficult interview. I can only imagine. I think he did a great job. So, I was definitely really interested in seeing what I'd been hearing about for months, and I was surprised. I went in not knowing, I just thought, okay, I know some of these sound bites. I know some of the things she said. We've seen her crazy sentencing speech. We've seen now her interview with her son Colby that he did on his Scar Wars podcast. But I was still really taken aback. I was very surprised at the amount of anger I saw from her. And I know that sounds so funny because you're like, I'm sure some people are looking at me going like, what did you expect? But I did not expect, John, you used the word contempt. I did not expect that just contempt and just absolute anger, just, coming from her so strongly. I haven't seen that before. I've seen manipulation. I've seen a mad woman. I've seen some crazy beliefs. I've seen denial. I've seen a personality disorder. This was new to me, this contempt, this anger.
Just Keith, what do you think, Keith? Why do you want to know, Keith? Just she kept repeating his name over and over again in a very contemptuous way. Megan, you're smiling. Why are you smiling?
Just because that tactic.
You lived with Lori, right?
I did, yeah,
so
for a short time.
Have you seen that side of her, or was that a new side of her none of us have seen?
Well, I mean, the manipulative side, obviously, yes, I've seen that. I think that the contemptuous side, yes, absolutely. The difference is that this was very much more in your face than I think I've ever seen her. When she was younger, she kept these things much more covert, much more under the surface, but they were always there. And the thing that I'm smiling about is that tactic of constantly using Keith's name. She had a way of trying to make you feel special and put you down at the same time.
Wow, that's powerful. All right, Lauren, I didn't mean to steal the mic. I was curious if Megan had seen that just in her personal interactions, but keep going.
No, I was listening to Megan for the very same reason. I want to know. And I thought that was really interesting what Megan just said about praising someone and putting them down at the same time with the Keith. Yeah, that's an interesting way to say it. I also think that, clearly she chose Keith Morrison to do this interview, right? We haven't heard from Lori for 5 years on a TV interview, I should say. We've heard from her, but not in a national television interview. She clearly chose Keith, right? I think there's part of that too. She knows that she knew who Keith was. She knows that Keith is famous. I think she loved being in front of someone who, the fame, and then just talking to him, that's so patronizing, right? Keith, hey, Keith. Yeah. So it's interesting.
What Keith referred to the ethics of interviewing her. I think, can you talk to us about the journalistic, you are a journalist, Lauren. Can you tell us about some of the ethics that Keith was mentioning and he's struggling with when deciding whether or not to give her a platform? On the one hand, she's a murderer, likely, convicted murderer. She's clearly trying to manipulate. And so on the one hand, you could say it's unethical to give her a platform. But on the other hand, I think I heard him say, people want to know. Do you want to talk us through how a journalist might balance the ethics of even doing an interview like this?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's fair for a lot of people to be upset watching this interview, giving a woman who is convicted of murdering her own children, and Tammy Daybell a platform. I actually completely understand that. And I cannot imagine being someone like Megan that's like personally connected to this story, or many of the other surviving victims that, I know and have become close to. Like, I'm sure it would feel really bad too. I don't want to discount that. When I just go into my journalist brain, I am of the belief that there is something to learn from everyone. Hidden true crime and why we cover crime and the criminals behind the crime. And we delve into their past and we delve into their histories. And that actually rubs people the wrong way sometimes. They're like, how could you do that? And I'm like, you can't cover crime without understanding the criminal, and you don't really make a difference. If we just sum people up as they're evil, we don't want to hear from them, just banish them away and let's move on with our lives. We're not really learning what happened or what's going on inside of their brains and their minds and what could have possibly created this crime. And so I think it's really, really important to interview everyone. And we've also gotten the same criticism on hidden true crime. I want to say, like, for example, I've interviewed many people without pushing back on them that maybe held Chad Daybell's beliefs or the prepping beliefs. I'll say this, Braxton Southwick, Megan, that's your cousin. Also Lori Vallow's cousin. I got a lot of pushback on the interview because I just listened to him and he talked about a worldview that maybe offended some people or frightened some people, or maybe that people felt was similar to Lori Vallow's. And I just let him talk and I listened. And I think that it is really important to actually learn and see things. A lot of people were like, can't you see that was so upsetting? He was doing this and this and this. And I want to say, exactly. So you caught something then, and you learned something from this interview without me having to push back. You came out with your thoughts and your opinions on this as you just listened. You don't necessarily need someone to, fight back with the person or to point out or get the aha moments or whatever. Just, I think though that it is so important to listen. And I know that Mormon Stories does that too. You listen to everyone. And Ron Meldrum, you guys interviewed him, and he actually he knew Chad Daybell, and he sort of kind of goes into this crowd. And I remember, I think you got a lot of pushback for that too, John. And I remember thanking you for that interview because I am a big believer that there is something to learn from everyone if we're just willing to listen, good or bad. And I think Lori Vallow is no exception, especially because her crimes are unfathomable.
Yeah.
And so I think we should be paying attention, trying to figure out what the hell went wrong.
Love it. Gerardo, let me give you a chance to give your thoughts leading up to actually watching the interview, if there's anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, well, I think I echo everyone's feelings. I have great respect for Keith Morrison. I think he overall did a great job given the circumstances, given how frustrating it can be to deal with a person like Lori with some clear narcissistic tendencies. I think I parse a little bit from the rest of the panel, maybe in this, that I do believe that the interview could have gone a lot different and maybe have a better response from Lori if someone with a deep understanding of Mormonism and cult mind control would have done the interview. I have been thinking, in ways that I would have approached it, and I have some ideas that I can talk about throughout the interview, and we can discuss and speculate how Lori might have responded differently. But that is one thing I did want to mention.
I think about that every true crime, or except hidden true crime, of course. But like when national reporters don't have an in-depth knowledge of Mormonism on so many of these cases, whether it's Tim Ballard, whether it's Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt, or this case, or so many others, there's so much I think that gets missed. So we'll dig into that for sure.
Yeah.
Let me just share a couple comments. So Unexcited says virtual hug of support for Megan. So there's a little love for Megan. You called it hate watching. Is that right, Megan? Did I hear you right?
I did. And I definitely got some pushback, even from my partner. He was like, I don't think I've ever heard that word before. I was like, yeah, as in I hate to watch it, but I'm going to watch it.
Yeah. Let me see. Amor of Alessi described the interview as a microcosm of her tactics. What do you guys think? Did the interview show us the real Lori Vallow, maybe even in a way we hadn't fully seen before?
Yes, absolutely.
Lauren, you want to go first?
And
I think absolutely, and I think that Keith showed us that. So well done, Keith Morrison. I think again it goes to that contempt that I saw, that anger. Like I said, we've all heard her say crazy things. We've all seen her manipulate. We've all seen her act in despicable ways, but I have never seen an anger that I think is murderous, in other words, that's full of hate, right? And Colby said that too in the episode. What she, his own mother, did to my sister Tylee was hate. And I saw how she could just hate. There was not a loving mother in this interview at all.
But isn't it kind of this weird, almost, there's a Mormon passive aggressiveness that I'm familiar with that may not be uniquely Mormon, but it was hate with like this twisted, dark smile. She was always smiling with everything hateful. You never saw like rage in her face. It was always this like plastic, sticky, sweet smile when she was pulling the knife out.
I do think it's important to consider one point, and the point of the circumstances. I think this is what we saw is a Lori, or someone who is responding questions that are coming from a person, from a person who she's seeing as antagonistic to her religious beliefs. Lori is someone who has deeply rooted religious beliefs, and she's being confronted by an unbeliever, and she knows that she's never going to be able to convince Keith or his followers about her religious beliefs. So she sees him as kind of lesser. And it reminds me, I mean, even though like it could be like a big stretch, obviously Mormon missionaries are not always this way. I did see a little bit of or could relate to when I was a Mormon missionary and I interacted with people who were clearly antagonistic to Mormonism. And some of the response of being kind of snarky and snappy, even if you read you go back and read how Joseph Smith sometimes interacted with people who were antagonistic to Mormons' beliefs, it's kind of somewhat similar responses.
Yeah. So I mean, from her perspective, it's fair to say she was seeing Keith as antagonistic. He's basically, I mean, I saw it as him just sharing the evidence of because he was careful in the interview whenever he would make an allegation to her or just relate the evidence, he would show the receipts, right? But then she would say, well, I could tell you've been manipulated, Keith. I could tell you're just sharing the party line, Keith. Were you there, Keith? Where was it, Keith? How do you know, Keith? And then he would show the little video clips, right? And I think he substantiated his questions with evidence. What did you think, Megan?
Yeah, I think that we did see the real Lori here. I think we saw, but as you said initially, this was a lesson in manipulation tactics. We saw her employing all of these different tactics throughout the interview, throughout the clips that we saw of her, and everything is masked with a smile. And that really is the ultimate manipulation, because we as empathic people, we tend to mirror the people that we're talking to because it's a way of bonding and relating with them. And when a manipulator smiles at you, it's because they want that bond. They want you to smile too. So even though they're saying something disturbing or problematic or demeaning, they're going to still smile at you because they want you to believe that they're actually being nice when they're not. And Lori sort of has this, people have commented on this sort of half smile, the little smirk that she does. She's always done that. I think it's more pronounced now that she maybe has had some what we call filler migration. But yeah, that side smile that she does is sort of like a half smirk where she kind of knows better than you. She's smarter than you. She's always done that.
Let me ask about that. One of the things that I think Mindy behind the scenes and I both noticed, there seems something off, maybe audibly and potentially, I'm not sure visually, just in terms of, we weren't sure. And we don't think it's appropriate pretty much ever to comment on people's appearance from sort of the standpoint of just being tacky or critical. So I just want to be clear about that. But I think Mindy and I wondered whether she had had a stroke because we almost heard some slurring, a different voice sound than we were used to. But then it also, I don't know if it looked, there seems something visually different and none of us could really put a pinpoint on it. So I'm not asking from like an aging standpoint or like even a beauty standpoint, did any of y'all wonder whether there was something off with her health that was being manifested either in her appearance or her voice?
I thought of a few things, and I understand what you're saying. There was like a side speak, and so you're not bringing up the ageism, but I will, because it's fair game. Because she also, I just want to point out, Lori claimed that she is an exalted being who had stopped aging. So fair game to say she's certainly aging. So I'll say that you're wrong, Lori. You're not exalted. You're aging like the rest of us. A few thoughts. I did a members only live about it, and there were some interesting comments from people, because I did bring up sort of the side speaking. Dysplasia was one of them that can be caused. It's a side effect of antipsychotic medications. I actually thought that was a really intriguing possibility. I know that Colby, her own son, brought up that it's just a lack of Botox behind bars, but I don't know if that would do it. Someone else said nerve damage from possible previous Botox. Other people brought up, or I had an idea of possibly, when we age, teeth can move. It could simply be just some stronger muscles on one side, or a jaw that's not even. But I think I was most intrigued by this idea of, because I have seen that before, this sort of side effect of antipsychotic medications or other medications, which doesn't mean that she's psychotic either. There are many reasons to take that medication. But it was certainly interesting to see, and I don't think we have seen that in other videos. So I do agree that she looked different beyond her natural aging process behind bars.
Megan or Gerardo, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have commented or suggested that it might be Bell's palsy, which, if I understand correctly, is a temporary condition. Drooping of the face and things like that. I think the thing that stood out to me is that in her recent hearings, where she asked the judge if she could represent herself, the judge granted her that, but he did put her through a series of questions. And one of the questions that he asked is if she was taking any medication, and she said no. Now, of course, we know Lori lies about things, but I think she's been pretty straightforward with this judge so far, mainly just because she wants to get him on her side. So I don't discount that she could be taking antipsychotics or other medications that could be causing side effects like this. We can speculate. It could be, Botox, nerve damage, Bell's palsy. I don't think necessarily she's had a stroke, but it's possible, right? These are things that we're not going to get a definitive answer on. But I think the most likely scenario is either she is on some kind of medication that is causing a little bit of a slur in her speech, or, she's just aging. And I will say too, though, part of her tactic when she talks is that sometimes she will not be as concise with her speech. I noticed this in the body cam footage when they visited her apartment looking for JJ, and also in her phone call with Colby when she was talking about, Tylee hates Melanie Gibb. Everybody knows this. She hates Melanie Gibb. She does that sort of thing, talking under her breath and slurring her words together a little bit as part of the way of manipulating people to not really pay close attention to some of the things she's saying.
This is great. We've got a comment from a medical esthetician. Alexander Lovin writes, I don't think it's filler migration for what it's worth, but I think not getting Botox or filler for 6 years, this is just what she looks like without upkeep. Thanks, Alexander Lovin, for that feedback. I want to thank those who are supporting us. Thanks, Dive Urgent. Chantel Buchla, sorry if I didn't pronounce that right. She says, been listening to all these Lori, Chad, and Ruby podcasts recently. You are also wonderful and informative. Love listening and sharing your channel. Thank you, Chantel. Thanks for the feedback. Also, Clary T says, just a little thank you because your work and all of your perspectives are so important. Thank you as well to Troublemaker Baker for your support, and Destoni. And then finally, couple more comments. Beth writes, I think Lori is laying groundwork to blame Tylee for Charles's death. Alex isn't here to contradict her, and she has no shame. So let's go. Thank you, Beth Coate, for that. Let's just go ahead and hit that right on. I had not watched Colby's YouTube stuff until Megan, you linked to it right before, but I was certainly shocked. And this was probably one of the two big reveals for those who don't follow this closely, was that she literally seemed to be implicating to Keith that Tylee, tell me if I've got this right, y'all, that Tylee was assigned to put JJ to bed, that she must have like put a pillow on his head, according to Lori, or mouth, hand over his mouth to keep him behaving or quiet, which then would have killed him. And again, these are horrible accusations, unless they're true and real. That Tylee killed JJ while putting him to bed, and then was so distraught at having killed him that she took her own life. Shocking, horrific allegations. Obviously, it seems like her only possible defense to the evidence that's out there. Maybe Megan, will have you respond, then Lauren, then Gerardo. What did y'all think of these accusations?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, this is super disturbing to have Lori try to blame everything on her own daughter, who she participated in the killing of. The first time that I heard that on the phone call on Colby's channel, of course, I was really upset by that. It made me so angry. And at the end of the day, I mean, this is Lori. She's never going to take responsibility for anything that she does. She's going to try to blame, anyone else that she can. I think this is the narrative that she's come up with, that she feels like she can stick with, that absolves her conscience of actually having to think about what she really has done. And I think she believes that it's plausible enough that it might get her, it might keep her from getting convicted or blamed for everything. It's super disturbing. It's hard for me to even really think about how she could get there in her mind. It's obviously crazy. But yes, that's her narrative, that she says that Tylee went to put JJ to bed. Maybe she held him down too hard, trying to keep him quiet. And that Lori came in and found both of them already passed away. And then she left and allowed someone else to take care of them after that. So obviously the evidence clearly goes completely 100% against all of this, because JJ was obviously alive after the last time that Tylee was seen. So there's no way that, I mean, this can be easily disproven, but I think in Lori's mind, she just really believes that she's going to get away with all of this. She really believes that she's not going to be held accountable. She really believes that she did nothing wrong. And she just wants to insert that plausible deniability of what happened to their bodies by just saying, I wasn't there, someone else took care of it.
Lauren, what are your additional thoughts? If you want to tell people anything else we should know about the evidence, for why just the evidence alone would contradict Lori's account, but also want to just hear the thoughts on how horrific it would be for a mom who potentially committed a murder to blame that murder on her dead daughter,
Yeah, it's despicable and evil on all sorts of levels. Yeah, the evidence absolutely contradicts this. First off, Tylee was killed first, weeks before JJ. So already complete contradiction. So
do we know that? Do we know that?
We know that. We absolutely know that. That is factual. That is evidence. Tylee was last seen in Yellowstone National Park. It was the last photo. And then she disappears. But we see from satellite footage of that evening, there is no burn pit in Chad Daybell's yard. And then the next morning, there is a burn pit that was shown in trial. We know that she was burned in Chad Daybell's yard that evening, that she went missing in Yellowstone National Park. We know a lot. That is facts. Those are facts that were shown in both Chad Daybell's trial and Lori's trial and in FOIA documents too. So So already we know that Tylee was murdered weeks before JJ.
Yeah,
So,
I think there's several pieces of evidence that can date the burial of Tylee weeks before. So, like you mentioned, the satellite image. There's also the text messages about the raccoon and all that, right? Like, kind of
exactly.
can
Thank
help.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Gerardo. The raccoon text is an important one. Chad Daybell texts his wife, Tammy, who's still alive at that moment, and says, well, I have had quite the morning. There was a raccoon that entered the yard, and I shot the raccoon, and I buried the raccoon in the pet cemetery. And then he eerily writes, I got rid of all of the limbs before the storm comes in. And I want you to know that many absolutely believe that he was talking literally, because that's how Chad Daybell talks, that and Tylee was dismembered and he got rid of her limbs in the burn pit. So right, Gerardo, so much evidence pointing to, we know for a fact that Tylee was murdered.
One more thing. Yeah.
Please.
The Alex being like tracking his cell phone to the area where the burial happened. Also, the date corresponds to all of that. So there's several pieces, right? Is that right?
Yeah. And I just want to throw out, I love having Gerardo as a band member. Exactly. Gerardo. Yes. Welcome, Gerardo. Glad you're here.
Wait, is he an official band member or is he an alternate band member? Like, it's a serious deal to add someone to the band. So, and does Minnie get a vote? Like, or
unofficial for now.
Okay, all right.
We'll sustain him next week. Yeah.
No, we're just teasing. Laura, what do you think about a mom shamelessly blaming her daughter for a murder that she committed?
Yeah, well, so evidence points to, factually, this is just preposterous. It's just wrong. It's just false and wrong. I also want to point out something that I know that not everyone understands, but this alibi of Lori, let's call it an alibi, that is what it is, has not changed. And not everyone knows that. Back right before her trial in 2023, she wrote out her alibi with her attorney's help, her defense team, and it was very discreet. And people didn't really understand or like look at the fine print, because you know, it was sort of that less is more. Like, they didn't tell the whole story, because I think her defense knew better than to go with this alibi of Lori's, that Tylee, her own daughter, the victim of a horrendous crime, was responsible. But she wrote in this alibi, and I was trying to pull it up. I have it here, but she stated that she walked into Alex Cox's apartment or townhouse in Rexburg and found both JJ and Tylee deceased, and that Melanie Gibb and David Warwick were in town at that time attending the Firm Expo, Rod Meldrum's event, and they were recording a fireside, and this just sort of happened. Then once she came out with more specific details after her trial, after her conviction, after her sentencing, on her son Colby's channel doing an interview, specifically stating, no, Tylee killed JJ. And then Tylee killed herself, that we hadn't heard. So I did reach out to her defense team and asked them, I said, has this always been her story, or has this changed and developed? And the answer from my defense source was, no, this is what she has always stated and always said. Something her defense made sure didn't come out in court.
Wow.
So we know that her story hasn't changed, and it's absolutely shocking, appalling, disgusting. I mean, I'm doing this with my hand, probably making a noise with the thing, and I'm doing it ironically on this book, The Sociopath Next Door. I mean,
please. Yeah, please.
Well, I mean, it's so beyond human comprehension that there's only one way to explain it in my mind, and that's through understanding sociopaths and psychopaths, where they will literally blame anyone, including the victim. And then I just want to say this about Tylee too. What came out in trial about Tylee's death is so horrendous. I won't get into the details here. I can't even, sometimes I feel physically ill, but Tylee's death was not was really, really, really bad. It was disgusting. It was horrendous. What happened to Tylee? I believe that she was a victim of torture during her death. I'll just say that. I think she was tortured by at least 2 people. It was really bad. And so to then imply that she did this is so despicable. Like it's so bad. And I feel so sorry for Colby and the other victims who have to then hear Colby. Let's talk about Colby, who has to then hear his mother. He is mourning his entire family. His entire family is just gone. And then to blame his innocent little sister after everything she went through is, I can't. It's horrible.
No, at the end of the interview, he was. I think I remember him sobbing, and it was like he was trying to entertain whether or not it was true, and then he concludes, "I can't believe that," but he was really trying to even process it and consider it, but then trying to think that his sister could do that. Did either of you see Colby's response? And do you want to share what that was? I wish we could have him on at some point, maybe. Megan,
Yeah,
did you see his
yeah,
response?
I did. Yeah, I watched his interview with Lori, his recorded phone call with Lori on his channel, and it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to watch him have to go through that. I could definitely see the anger in his face when Lori started describing that version of events, and him recounting that to her, just confirming that this is what she was saying. And then after the phone call, hangs up, and Colby comes on, and he's crying. He's devastated. This was sort of his last chance to connect with his mom and to see if the real Lori was still in there somewhere. And she's not. And I was in awe of him being able to keep his composure while he was actually on the phone with her, because I was infuriated. I was enraged. I can't imagine how he must have felt. He must have felt that, times 10. But for him to be able to keep his composure and get done what he set out to do, which was to see exactly her explanation. He wanted to hear it from her, exactly what she was, the narrative that she was putting out there of what happened to the kids. And he got that done. And then he was able to tell her, no, you can't be in my life. No, you can't be in my kids' lives. After this, your explanation, your zero remorse. No, you can't have any contact with me after this. And then just to see him, breaking down, I don't think he believes it for a second that that's what Tylee did. And he even said that on the phone call. There's no way that Tylee did this. He said that on the interview after talking about the phone call. There's no way that Tylee did this. And I think the emotional reaction, the tears that we're seeing from him is a settling in, like the finality of that relationship coming to an end, and the acceptance that he's never going to have a mom.
Yeah.
Did any of you see Colby's reaction to the Dateline episode?
I started to watch it last night. I just got to the part, but not much. I got to the part where he was mocking the 31 lives that Chad and his mother had, and then said, "Oh, who were you? Who was the family guy? Griffin?
Peter Griffin.
Peter Griffin." He said, "Oh, what were you, Peter Griffin, in the past life?" And then we had to go to dinner. But that alone, I was proud of that response. If you don't laugh, you cry sometimes. So I don't know I have not watched it. It's about an hour on his channel, the Scar Wars podcast for Colby Ryan. It's on YouTube. So I jumped on, saw him at least have a bit of a sense of humor, mocking both his mother and Chad Daybell. That made me happy, and I did not see the rest of it. But okay. Yeah, so Colby just sort of implied that Chad was probably Peter Griffin in another life. So
Tiger Lily says Colby is going to cut up clips to respond to and do a better reaction show. Okay, so that may be forthcoming. Go Go ahead, Gerardo.
I have a question for everyone. And something that I thought was really interesting was it was clear that she's still deeply in love with Chad. She sees him as
Lori.
Lori is. And I wanted to ask if we know whether Lori is aware that Chad basically threw her under the bus during his defense at his criminal trial.
Yes, I have my sources and I've seen some things. People have tried to tell her while she's been behind bars, and her response, I've seen her responses. Her response has been that people don't understand court. It's a lot of he says, she said, a lot of, the legalese and the legal procedures. People don't really understand. It's not what you think. And she
Denial.
then
In denial.
what?
She's in denial, basically.
Well, I think everything's in denial. I think she really does believe that they are together. I mean, he didn't even wear a wedding ring during the trial, where she does. I mean, it might be a makeshift wedding ring, with elastic hair ties, but she makes sure to show that she is married. She wants to be called Lori Daybell. He is distancing himself from her. But when people have tried to say that, he is throwing her under the bus, she thinks it's the attorneys. She thinks it's all just sort of procedure. You brought up denial. I think her entire worldview is denial, and I think she really believes it. And we're going to get into that. We talk about how she's lying and she's making things up and she's blaming Tylee, and she has these beliefs that are just insane. I think she believes it all, and I think she believes it all because of denial. Like, she can't. I mean, she's been diagnosed with delusional disorder, and I think that comes from this sort of denial. You become delusional when you refuse to see reality. And so she is not listening to people, and she is the one that knows everything. She is all knowing, all understanding. All of us are just, peasants and paupers who just don't get it. So she pretty much schools people who bring up to her that Chad is throwing her under the bus. We don't understand. She understands. And I'm sure we'll understand more when she's on Dancing with the Stars.
Well, that was dark. Okay, so yeah, let's jump to that. So I'll just say some of the things that were disturbing for me. She's claiming that she gets visits from Jesus, that Jesus, well, she claims that during, I guess, Tylee's birth, that she died in childbirth, kind of this, co-opting the near-death experience sort of situation, that she was caught up to talk to Jesus, that she found out that Tylee was going to have lots of medical complications before Tylee was even born, and that she was able to visit with Tylee as a spirit child. It's almost like this dark Saturday's Warrior. It's like a dark, murderous Saturday's Warrior reframe, where she's talking to Tylee in the pre-existence before she's born. Tylee says, I know I'm going to come to Earth. I know my life is going to be short. I mean, presumably, I know I'm going to die by suicide at 16 after I murder my brother. Like, I wonder if Tylee saw that in the pre-existence. I don't know if Lori totally thought that through, because on the one hand, why would Tylee agree to come to the Earth knowing that she would die early? But then at the same time, later, when she actually dies, it's by suicide after murdered her or killed, maybe unintentionally, her brother. But anyway, that Tylee agreed to an early death before she even came to this earth. Again, that Lori and Jesus are besties. She joked that she was Jesus's favorite, that she wants to have a bumper sticker that says Jesus loves everyone, but I'm his favorite, or something like that. But also that she's got she's best friends with Tammy Daybell, the murdered wife of her lover. And also that Jesus has shown her that she and Chad are going to be exonerated and that they're going to be set free. So, there's this question of, does she really believe that Jesus is visiting her, that she's hanging out with Tammy in the jail cell as a spirit, that she's seen visions of the future? Lauren, you said you wanted to make sure and cover this, so I'm going to give you first go, but then Gerardo and Megan, I want to hear, does she really believe these spiritual visitations? Lauren.
I think she absolutely believes them. I do think that it is caused by denial and her refusal to ever be wrong, and she couldn't handle the truth. It's defense mechanism. By explaining this, I'm not excusing her. It's despicable and, psychotic. She, I think, really does believe it. And I just want to say how appalling it is to say, too, that she is friends with Tammy Daybell. She is the mistress that had Tammy Daybell murdered. And to say that she is friends with her is so offensive. Just so offensive. I can't even imagine, how Tammy's family feels hearing that. But I am in the camp of, yes, Lori Vallow believes everything she is spouting.
Wow. I'm just starting right now. YouTube has the feature of polls. And so I just kicked off a YouTube poll to ask our audience whether they believe that Lori believes that these visions are real. So I'm going to ask y'all on YouTube to go ahead and vote, and then we'll share the reactions. And we also love to see your comments about that. Anytime you like an episode, subscribe to the channel or comment, it's going to help this get disseminated more widely. So Lauren's voting yes. Gerardo, you're a Mormon Stories, heavy participant. What do you think? Do you think she really believes it, or is she just making it all up?
Yeah, well, I think I agree with Lauren. I think she truly believes everything. She, I think, like Megan said, she could have been experiencing delusional disorder where she, becomes more entrenched in a belief that she lost touch with reality. But the problem is that we know that a lot of these beliefs are highly strategic, manipulative, and also they seem to be pretty self-aware. And I think that suggests that they're is not totally fully delusional. That there's definitely, we can see that there's a lack of remorse, and an extreme self-importance, and she has an ability to lie without hesitation. I think that correlates a lot more with a narcissistic personality disorder. But yeah, I mean, I think she believes her lies, and she believes that her theology.
I mean, and I want to get you in with this, Megan, too. But as I'm thinking about my Mormon experience, like I heard about Moroni's challenge, that if you pray about the Book of Mormon, God will give you an answer. So I read the Book of Mormon and I prayed about it, and I didn't get an answer. And I didn't lie to people that I got an answer. I just said, well, I didn't get an answer. So what if she really does believe it? Then she would have had to have had those experiences where, I mean, unless y'all believe that Jesus really did appear to her and that Tammy really does hang out with her, let's just assume we all don't believe that Jesus and Tammy and Lori are all having a gab fest in her prison cell. So given that we don't think that's likely, then what your theory, Lauren or Gerardo, would be that she literally is having these dreams or visions that Jesus is appearing to her, Tammy's appearing to her, that she hung out with Tylee as a near-death experience, and that she really had those experiences and believes that she had those experiences. And that's hard to believe, that she really believes she had those experiences, versus just, it seems like her making it up is the easiest answer. Megan, we haven't given you a chance to respond, but then I want to hear people respond to that. And right now, by the way, the vote, 481 out of the 30, there's 3,500 people on this live stream. So far, 485 of you have voted, and 67% of you say that she really believes she had the visions, and 33% of you who voted think she's lying. All right, Megan, let's get you in here.
Well, I mean, let's start off by saying that Lori is a pathological liar. She's lied about obviously so many things. And I think this interview really brings that out, because in the face of Keith Morrison giving Lori actual receipts, where one example is where Keith Morrison talks about Charles being possessed by a demon named Ned Schneider. And Lori says, "Did you hear him say that?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I saw the body cam footage. You know, I heard him say those words." Even in the face of that, you know, very telling evidence, Lori still wants to delude anyone who will believe her into accepting her narrative of events or believing something different. So we know that she's a pathological liar. But also there's a phenomenon where you can delude yourself. You can convince yourself that something is true when it's not true. So I think she has deluded herself that she has seen Jesus. I think she's deluded herself that Chad actually is a prophet. I think she's deluded herself that she has a special mission to gather the 144,000. I think she's deluded herself that she and Chad have done nothing wrong and will be exonerated because they're on this special mission from God. So I think one can convince oneself of things that are not true. And I think that's what she has done in this case. There is also, I just want to go back real quickly to people saying, is she deeply in love with Chad? And they're still communicating. They, you know, Keith alleged in one of his, you sort of unpack recap of the interview afterwards that they're writing letters to each other. So they're communicating. But Lori's not capable of love in the way that most normal people would define love, as in an attachment to someone, a security with them, and a desire for their happiness and their well-being. Lori's not capable of that kind of a connection. So when people talk about, you know, she still loves Chad, she's still wearing the wedding ring. Well, she's still wearing her little, you know, hair tie around her finger to let people know she is still very much Daybell. She wants to be Daybell because that gives her an elevated status to be married to a prophet or somebody she believes is a god who was the Holy Ghost in a past life. So she is always going to do and say the things that are going to elevate her status above everyone else, and that are going to try to manipulate people into believing that she is this glorified being who has a special mission. That's always what she's going to do. All of that being said, there are always these little moments that I see just after she tells Keith one of her lies. She sort of looks down and her face falls a little bit. The mask slips just a little bit. So I do think that the real Lori is still in there somewhere. And I think that the real Lori knows that she's lying, that she's manipulating, but this is what she has to do given the circumstances of where she is right now in her life.
Yeah.
And any other comments on the topic?
There's also a middle ground here. I think you're putting it in, John, whether, you know, does Lori believe she's literally meeting Jesus and talking to him and being friends with Tammy and Tylee, or is she, you know, is she lying to everybody and doesn't really believe it? I think there is a middle ground where she could believe this is happening, you know, she's talking to Jesus, but not in the sense that we imagine she's believing she's talking to Jesus. An example of this, I think, is the portal theology that Chad Daybell came up with, where, you know, they believe that the certain people, especially him and Lori, could use spiritual portals to communicate with the spirit world. And Lori claimed that she had a portal in her closet at her home in Rexburg, where she can kind of spiritually connect with Chad. And I think this shows way before the murders that they are people that are willing to believe these things, because they might feel some kind of impression or feeling that this thing is working, not in the sense that, you know, you and I my belief is actually working. I don't know if that makes sense, but you know, think about how Mormon prophets today, when they talk about communicating with Jesus and receiving revelation, most Mormons, a lot of Mormons would interpret that as like, oh, they're actually talking to Jesus, when in reality, that's not what's on Mormon prophets' minds today. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Lauren, any final comments you want to make?
Yeah. I don't, you know, yes. So many things. First off, I want to correct something I said. I said that she was psychotic. I meant psychopathic. It is, I think, psychopathic to say that didn't happen. That's not true. That, you know, with evidence right in front of your face, that's what psychopaths do. And no, she didn't really have visions, but it's sort of like when we were talking about Kevin Franke and the documentary, like he wanted to believe that he was seeing things flying across the room. He wanted to believe. He said, I'm an engineer and I can't explain it. He wanted to believe it. He wanted that smudge on the window to be a handprint from a demon. So when you want something, you're going to believe it. And there was this moment in the Franke documentary too, where Kevin says, what was in front of my face, looking at it, you know, my abused children, the photos of my children, absolutely abused and tortured, wasn't what it was in my brain, and it wasn't the reality in my brain, what I was looking at. And he couldn't compute it. He couldn't, he like refused. So this idea, I always say, people always say that seeing is believing, and it's not true. Believing is actually seeing. The way we believe is the way we will see. If you want to believe something, then it's incredible what a mind can do. It's actually frightening too. And I think that you have to look at, let's call it what it is. It's terrorism. I mean, this was a murder spree across states. That's terrorism in the name of beliefs. And terrorism comes from extreme religious beliefs, extremism that people believe that they will die for, that, you know, call it what it is. And so I think we need to address this, that the minds are an incredible thing. And if you want to believe something, and seeing isn't necessarily believing is seeing, even with evidence right in front of your face. And I think, to me, that's been the most frightening thing as a journalist, looking at this world and looking how we're computing information and receiving information, you know, and watching how politicians deny what's really going on in this world when we, you know, evidence says it ourselves, like, no, this really happened. And people just believe what they want to believe. And so Lori Vallow, I think, is a representative of sort of this world that we live in, where if you want to believe something, you can believe it. And I say this because I think we all need to kind of check ourselves and start believing evidence a little bit more. But you know, it's not. We've seen this time and time again with history. We believe what we want to believe, and maybe we shouldn't. And then I just want to say, with Gerardo bringing up the portals, and John, you bringing up the near-death experience in childbirth, and me bringing up the aging backwards, these are also the books that Lori Vallow is reading. All of those things are found in the Visions of Glory by John Pontius and Tom Harrison that Lori Vallow was reading poolside when she was confronted by Hawaii police. This is a worldview that she is believing. So yes, she is creating and manipulating things in her brain to have excuses, as we point out, like, oh, this is going to really work in my favor if it's my daughter's fault, and this is good, and so she's manipulative and she's lying, but you know, this is also a worldview, and her perception is this greater worldview that I think is really sort of important to point out and address.
Yeah. Think about when members of the LDS Church, you know, stand up once a month in sacrament meeting, and they say, I know the church is true. You know, I think everyone outside of Mormonism would know that that phrase doesn't necessarily mean they have an actual knowledge in the empirical sense. What it often means is they feel something deeply, you know, they want it to be true. They have had an emotional experience, and that they interpret as confirming it's true. And I see somewhat a similarity here with when Lori's talking about these things that to us sound crazy, you know, like talking to Jesus. Like, you know, if we could really put ourselves in her head, I don't think she would see it the same way we're imagining she's talking to Jesus.
Love it. Let me just thank all the people that are that have liked this episode and subscribed. Thanks to all the super chats. We're going to get to all the super chats. I may save them either for different parts of the episode or a little bit towards the end, because I don't want to disrupt the flow of the conversation just to show a bunch of super chats. But just know they're going to come. I did a second poll. So the first poll, I closed it after 739 votes. So by the way, somebody said I'm yelling. I'll try not to yell into the microphone. It's hard. After 739 votes, the final tally is 66% believe that Lori actually believes her visions. 33% do not believe that. I've now put up a new poll, and the new poll is, does Chad actually believe he and Lori will be saved by Jesus, and also, you know, in all these visions and divine intervention and all this? And weirdly, tell me if y'all think this is weird, it's the exact opposite with our audience. 64% of you do not believe that Chad believes that they will be saved by Jesus, or that Jesus is behind all of this. And only 35% of you think Chad is a true believer. Does that surprise any of our panelists that our viewers have the exact opposite view of Chad? Let's hear it. Or Megan, you go first.
No, it doesn't surprise me, because I agree. I don't think Chad believes it. The look on his face and his body expression, his body language, his demeanor, his expression during his trial, and especially during his sentencing, I believe that he had some, forgive the expression, come to Jesus moments there, where he's facing the reality of the death penalty. Lori's not. And so for him, I think maybe this is a lot more real for him. The reality that, you know, of what they actually did, the reality that, you know, he was making this all up. He was delusional. I think he did a lot of this stuff to get Lori's attention. He changed his tune a little bit when Julie Rose started to get recognition for having a near-death experience. Then all of a sudden, oh, his was a near-death experience too. And then, you know, his books that were fiction before suddenly became real, because he knew that that gives him, again, some elevated status within the church community and within the prepper community of, you know, having these visions. I think he knows more than Lori does that he has manufactured a lot of this, and that he did it in order to get closer to Lori and to, you know, the whole money, power, sex thing. I think that Chad has a recognition of his own delusion, and that it did exist. I don't think he's deluded anymore. I think he has a recognition of his guilt. So I agree. I agree with the viewers. I don't think Chad believes it the way that Lori does.
Gerardo and Lauren? Gerardo?
I agree. I agree with Ian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything, Lauren? Yeah.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Chad, because this has been a discussion I've been having with my husband for 5 years, like, where, just so you know, where my husband, who's a criminal psychologist, he believes that Chad does believe it, but he believes that, sort of like Megan said, that he's convinced himself of it through sort of like, as things have progressed, like he was very manipulative and, you know, BSing his way through this, and then was just like, wow, like, this is real. I'm believing this. Like, look at me. I'm the man. Look at this, you know, woman I'm with. I think for me, the question with Chad's belief is, where do his beliefs end and begin? Because we know, or I believe, that he believes in Mormonism. I believe that he believes in his political worldview. I believe that he believes in dark and light. I think he believes some people are taken by evil spirits, right? When I hear and go to attend his trial and I see him manipulating Lori with texts as she writes, and he says, oh yeah, you can control the elements, babe. And, you know, you're the greatest of all things. And Jesus loves you most, babe. And you're a goddess. Like, I don't know if he believes that. Like, is he just BSing this woman to, you know, sleep with her? Maybe. So I think for me, the question with Chad is, where do his beliefs end and where do they begin? And I do believe that he has some very extreme religious beliefs. I believe that when he was giving that speech the day he met Lori Vallow, and he's talking about the second coming and how people are going to actually travel to Ivans, where Jody Hildebrand is. And he mentions that, you know, Ivans is going to be a place. And they're going to travel up, and then there's going to be this Mecca in Rexburg. And that's why he's there. And he moved his whole family there. And he did. He moved his entire family there. Like, I think that's a belief. I think he believes these extreme beliefs. Then he meets this hot blonde girl who's, by his words, you know, hot and loaded. At that point, does he start manipulating and know he's not a prophet? Or is he convincing himself he is? So for me, the eternal question is, where do his extreme beliefs begin and where do they end?
All right. Let me now go to asking you all, you know, Keith, basically the first, I'd say 3/4 of the 2 hours was him just retelling the entire story. There were a couple points that really stuck out to me, but I'm curious, Lauren and Megan and Gerardo, were there any points of the retelling that were particularly new or interesting to any of you before I bring out the ones that I want to bring out in terms of just the evidence shown, the videos shown, Lori's reaction? Anything y'all want to highlight, or should I just start mentioning some?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mention.
Okay. Yeah. So the video portion, let's see, where they show Chad, and is it Lori bringing in the spare tire from the automobile, and then the chair from the automobile, and then they kind of walk out, and I guess it makes a reference to Chad touching Lori in a special way. Yeah, and then, you know, they're basically insinuating that they're prepping the car for an assassination attempt. Had y'all seen that footage before, and was that surprising to you at all?
Yeah, we've seen that before. And this was brought out actually during Lori's trial, where she Googled how to remove, or Alex Googled how to remove the back seat of a Jeep. And then they show this footage of them coming into the storage unit. You know, Chad is helping her bring the tire in and then bring the back seat in. And then Alex is seen the next day taking the tire out, taking the back seat back out to put it back in the Jeep. So we've seen that one before. I don't think I noticed Chad patting her on the butt, though. I don't think I noticed that one before.
My favorite part of that footage, yes, we have seen it before, but I always enjoy pointing this out, that when Chad is removing the attire, and as you say, John, touching Lori in a special way, as he's removing the tire he is rolling it. Chad has to roll it. And then when Alex is putting it back, he actually carries the tire. And that's just a little detail that I love to point out too, that, Chad can't even lift the tire that Alex can. So once again, not a god, not a prophet, can't even lift a tire, but yeah.
I always find that really funny too, Lauren, and thanks for pointing that out. Because yeah, if he was really a god, don't you think he'd have some special strength at least where he could lift a car tire?
Right. Well, Peter Griffiths. It goes to the Peter Griffith. Like what in the world did she see in him? He couldn't even lift the tire. Like people just can't wrap our brains around what she saw in Chad. And it's just one other like little subtle thing. Like her brother can lift the tire and Chad can't. Like what's he good for if he can't even lift a Jeep tire? Sorry.
He's a little bit schlubby, I have to admit that. Okay, maybe the most confrontational part of the whole episode was when Keith just flat on asks her, were you there with them, when they died? And she's like, which place? Which place? You don't know, Keith. You don't even know what you're talking about. And he like got serious and he basically said, did you watch your children die? And then she says, that's a terrible question.
Sad question. Yeah.
What's that? A sad question.
Sad question. I thought that was an interesting just adjective she used. So yeah, sad question.
And then she ended up saying no. What did y'all think to that exchange? Lauren, let's have you go first since you jumped in.
Yeah, I actually thought that was a really poignant moment because she is so full of contempt and anger. And so for her to use the word sad actually struck me when she said, that's a sad question. That almost felt like, oh, did we just see Lori like use a bit of emotion? Did we just see a crack in that mask where like she can't go there because that's sad? And it took me back to a day at her trial. Again, I attended every day of her trial and there was very, very little emotion from Lori. She flirted with her attorney. She smiled. She laughed. She very flippant. And that was something that everybody at her trial noticed. But there was this one day in trial, and it was the day they were going to show her children's autopsies. And all of a sudden we come back from recess and nothing's happening. And Lori's not showing up. And she finally comes out very angry and distraught and upset. And her attorneys have to argue that Lori feels like she shouldn't have to be in the courtroom when the autopsies of her children are shown. And everyone sort of gasped, it's just like, if this person can't get more despicable, she just did it, right? Like, you're going to force this jury and all of us to look at these autopsies of your children. You are here because of these autopsies of your children. Like, it is just horrendous what has happened to your children. And you think that you shouldn't have to look at them when all of us are going to have to see them. And this jury, these innocent people here deciding your fate are going to have to look at them. Like, it was just this moment of just like, how dare she? And then the judge ruled, of course, that she had to be there. And through the rest of that day in trial, she sort of pouted and looked sad and wouldn't look at the screen and look down. And although we were all upset, and I was upset, I then watched Chad Daybell's trial, where he just watched the autopsies with no issues, checked them out, looked at his deceased wife. A group of us were sitting behind Chad Daybell as he scrolled pictures of Tammy dead without making an emotion. And after seeing that, I was like, oh my gosh, like, now like the whole Lori thing doesn't seem so bad, that she didn't want to see autopsy photos of her children. And so for this moment of her saying, oh, that's a sad question, I just wonder if that was just like a slip of just like, yeah, like that makes her sad. And that's where her denial comes from. And now I'm going full circle. Mm-hmm. She is in absolute denial because she cannot handle the truth. And then of course that moment of, oh, that's a sad question, she jumped back to being super angry and defiant. So it was just this sliver of a moment. And I thought, is that where her denial is coming from? She just can't go there.
Yeah. Gerardo, did you want to add something?
I think I agree with Lauren. That's a really good assessment as to how she decides, where how her emotions can drive her worldview, and then come up with ways to justify these horrific events.
Megan, anything you want to add about that exchange?
Yeah, I agree with Lauren's assessment as well. I just want to point out, though, that, everything that we heard from Lori, her responses to Keith's questions, it's all part of that delusional manipulation. She's answering questions with questions. She's trying to obfuscate by, re-asking, in what place were you there? In what place? Where do you think it happened, Keith? What are you saying, Keith? Just trying to steer everything back to her, giving the narrative that she wants. Again, Keith saying like she had an agenda. It was to put forward this story. And that's where she keeps trying to steer it back to, just trying to take back the interview from Keith to say, I'm trying to tell you the truth and you don't want to listen. Stop asking me these questions so that I can tell you my truth, but we do see sort of a change in her demeanor when she says that's a really sad question. I don't necessarily think that she's feeling any sadness at that moment. I think she's just calling attention to the fact that it's a bold question. It's a really direct question. And it's a really hard question for her to answer because she can't answer it without letting something slip, right? So she doesn't ever answer the direct question that Keith asks her. What she says is, I was not there. She doesn't say, he asks her, did you watch your children die? She doesn't say no. That's very telling. She just says, I was not there. And that could mean anything to Lori. It could mean her spirit wasn't there, her mind wasn't there. It could mean that, she participated, but maybe left the room at some point. It could mean anything. And that's, I think, what I've learned with Lori is that whatever she tells you has a different definition in her mind than it does to the rest of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Really quickly, because this is such a dark story, I want to just take a second to share something really positive and something really happy. So basically, some of you may remember that I interviewed Anna Schreier recently on Mormon Stories podcast. She grew up in Utah as a member of the Assembly of God Church and, as a Pentecostal. And she did an interview and she talked about how eventually she moved back east and worked for a church that had her gut her house because they had promised to help her renovate her house. And then when she lost her faith in her church, it left her house gutted with no one to help her renovate it. And I just wanted to share with you all something super happy and inspirational. This photo right now is a photo of former Mormon Bishop Nathan Hinckley. He is literally at Anna Schreier's house right now, and they're renovating Anna Schreier's house as just a service project. Y'all will know that Nathan Hinckley runs a new YouTube channel called The Bishop's Interview. It's got over 2,000 subscribers, and Nathan's working really hard to build a channel of his own. But I just think it's really, really inspiring in a time that's so dark to just see an example of people out of the goodness of their heart trying to make a positive difference in the world. So thank you, Nathan. Love you, Anna. Thanks to everyone who's helping Bishop Nathan. And we'll have hopefully y'all again back on Mormon Stories to kind of share that inspiring story. Anyway, I just had to share that. I've also started another poll asking our viewers and listeners if they think Keith did an overall good job with the interview. So far, with 250 votes, 82% say they think Keith did a good job with the interview. 18% say no to that. Let me just ask y'all, Keith was interviewed by some other journalists just about what the interview was like for him. And what I heard him say was that she had this narrative that she wanted to tell. And he spent most of the, hour and a half, 2 hours that he had just trying to corral her, and that she wasn't very cooperative in the interview. And then there's even the point of the interview where she says, it's going to take me hours and hours and hours to tell you this full story. Maybe we need a lot more, maybe we need a lot more time. We need a lot more of these episodes. And of course, the prison system isn't going to let her do infinite interviews, but also that almost speaks to this idea that she just wants as much fame and as much attention as she can get out of this. What do y'all think about, and Lauren, I'll have you go first because you are amongst us, the actual journalist. What do you guys think about Keith? Was he nervous? Was he aggressive? Was he annoyed? Was he effective? And I'll have each of you take a stab at that question we'll ask our viewers and listeners to please vote, please comment, and also please like this episode and subscribe, not only to this channel, but to Hidden True Crime and Third Verse Midlife Revolution as well. Go ahead, Lauren.
It would be a very difficult interview to do, and it's sort of hard to assess because we actually didn't see that much of the 90-minute interview. I think actually that might be everyone's biggest disappointment. It was a bit of mine too, that we wanted to see all 90 minutes, understanding why they couldn't. They had a story to tell, but they showed us some really important parts and some important sound bites. I think that this is probably an interview. This is the type of interview where he probably did need about 4 hours. There are those interviews where sometimes you can't even get to the meat. If someone's really defensive and on their own tangent, you can't really get to the meat of the interview for about an hour and a half because you just have to give them a safe space to talk and let them share what they want before you can kind of really delve in. I imagine that the time crunch wasn't helpful. I think he probably did the best he could. I appreciated how he was just trying to ask this question about her being there when her kids died, and she just wouldn't let him ask it. And you could tell he finally got frustrated. He's like, that's not what I'm asking. Just hear me out. It would be a very difficult interview to do, and I can't imagine the pressure that he had to do it within 90 minutes. And so from what I saw, he did a great job.
I want to ask all of you this, Lauren. Is there a question, one question you would want to make sure you didn't leave there without asking her that he didn't ask? And if you need a time to think about that, I want to give Gerardo and Megan a chance to answer as well.
Yeah, I think I definitely want to think about that.
Okay.
Question. That's a good question. Yeah.
We'll come back. Gerardo and Megan, who do y'all think he did a good job? No? Do you wish he could have done something better? Is there a question you would want him to ask? Go ahead, Megan.
I think Keith did an excellent job, and you have to consider what he has to work with over here. If you haven't listened to the phone call between Colby and Lori, it's basically the same set of circumstances where Colby was trying to ask her some very specific questions and she would not answer them. She was, taking this roundabout route where he asks her a question and then 20 minutes later, she still has not answered it because she is jumping around. She's telling different narratives. She's trying to over-explain in some places. She's trying to avoid answering the actual question that's being asked and manipulate. So Keith even said in the couple of interviews that he did with other people that it was really frustrating. She was very combative. It was really difficult for him to get her to answer anything that he was asking because she had this alternate, agenda that she was trying to get done. So I think he did a really excellent job. And for anybody who's saying that Lori manipulated him, I don't think that's true. Keith is incredibly smart. He's dealt with people like this before. I think he knew what he was doing. He was well prepared for the interview. And he's just dealing with somebody who's got a bag of cats in their head. So of course it's going to, come across as difficult. And I think the reason we didn't see more footage of Lori talking is because it was like this meandering, nonsensical narrative that would have been too crazy for people to understand. And that's why I said, if you've listened to the phone call between Colby and Lori, it's the same type of thing. It's really hard to decipher. I do an episode on my channel where I break down every little manipulation and every lie that she does during that interview. So I understand Keith, handling things the way that he did. And I thought that he handled it really well. And then there's one other thing that people keep saying, about, Keith giving her a platform and everything. Well, actually, I think they did a good job of only giving the few little snippets of information that were even useful for us to hear, and not allowing Lori to take the narrative away, instead telling that part of the story through Colby's eyes. And I really appreciated that they did that.
Can I say a couple other things?
Yeah, please, Lauren.
Megan, yeah, I agree with Megan. I didn't know that people thought that they thought maybe Keith was manipulated. Absolutely not. Yeah, Keith is a smart man. And I also agree with Megan, where she says that they ended up not giving her a platform. And I actually said that too. Did I want, for like selfish reasons, to see 90 minutes of Lori Vallow talking to Keith Morrison? Yeah. But in the end, yeah, I'm sure that Lori is very upset that she didn't get those 90 minutes in. There was one thing that I didn't like that Keith did. There was a moment where Lori said, I thought we were friends, Keith. I thought we were friends. Like, she's clearly pushing him and putting the questions back on him, right? Like, he's asking him questions and she's sort of twisting and asking the questions back. And then he goes, yeah, we're friends. Or I can't remember what he says, but he kind of implies they're friends. That disappointed me. Like, I think he should have put the question back on her. Like, well, do you think we're friends? I mean, I don't know. He doesn't have to necessarily say we're not friends, back off, but I don't think he should have said like, yeah, we're friends, because that's not true. And I think he could have gotten more control of the interview if he just put that question back on her. Well, do you think we're friends? What are we thinking? I think that would have been a good moment. I didn't appreciate that he kind of claimed that he was friends with her.
Got it.
I agree with that somewhat, although I do think what's interesting is that narcissistic people are actually really easy to manipulate. If you give them what they want, then they're going to continue, exposing themselves and exposing their manipulation. So maybe Keith was doing that just in an effort to say, sure, Lori, we're friends. You can tell me anything, but I do agree. I think it would have been interesting to have him put that back on her and say, well, what do you think? Do you think we're friends? I think that would have been a little sneakier. But also I want to address people saying that they're disappointed in Keith for saying that he actually liked Lori at the end of this interview. I want to say that I think what Keith was trying to express there, and again, now I'm putting words in someone else's mouth or interpreting what they're saying, but I think he had a respect for her like a boxer has a respect for a sparring partner. I think he appreciated that she does have an intellect. People like to say that Lori's dumb. She's not dumb. She's not book smart, right? She's not super educated, but she certainly is not dumb. She has the intelligence of knowing how to manipulate people. It's a certain type of intelligence. She knows how to read people. She knows how to say what people want to hear in a certain way. She knows how to turn the conversation in a certain way. She knows how to, answer a question without actually answering it. That's a certain type of intelligence. So I think that's all Keith was saying, was that, after meeting her and talking with her, that he had a certain level of, not like as in I enjoy spending time with her, but I liked that she had some intelligence. She had some intellect, and there was something there for him to work with, not necessarily that like he likes her, enjoys her, thinks she's a good person.
I agree with understanding how you like someone. I think that's actually a really important thing to point out, because I've actually said to myself, I was like, if Lori was in my ward, I probably would have been friends with her. Probably been friends with her and her sister Summer and really liked them. Chad Daybell? Never. Absolutely not. There would have been no redeeming quality about Chad Daybell that attracted to me to want to be his friend whatsoever. Lori? Yeah, I think we probably would have done lunch, maybe, gone on a girls trip one week. And I've been like, okay, like I can see, right, people liking her. So I think you're right with that. Yeah. And I want to point out again, that I don't think that Keith should have said that they weren't friends. I understand the narcissistic ego. I just think it would have gotten a more interesting response out of saying, well, do you think we're friends? Maybe that's, I just want to know like how she saw it, so.
Gerardo, let's get you in here. Anything you would have asked? Do you think you did a good job overall?
Yeah, how I started this episode was agreeing with everyone that I think he's super talented. Keith did a generally really good job. I think I feel kind of strongly that the thing that was missing there is a deep understanding of Mormonism, in a deep of understanding of how to talk to people who have deeply rooted religious beliefs, especially those kinds of beliefs.
What would you have asked her? I could think of some things I would have asked her, but what would you have asked her in terms of her Mormonism, her beliefs, doctrine, theology, history, that sort of thing?
I think more than what I would have asked versus what he didn't ask, I think I would have, my opinion is that I probably would have framed the interview differently. So, for example, instead of coming here to try to corner her, I would come to her and say, look, we want to tell your story, but the people that are watching this know what the media has said so far about the facts. They know what the court already determined. They know what the jury said. They've seen the evidence. So I want you to give your version of the facts based on that evidence, instead of Keith coming here saying, but the facts are that those are not the facts, kind of saying these are the facts that people know, or the evidence that people know about. Let's talk. And I want to ask you about how you would explain it, so people can understand your point of view.
Yeah,
and that could have opened a little bit more of not so much of a barrier. Like, I'm here to tell you my version of things. It could have maybe avoided her ranting about a lot of things, and not really answering the questions, if it would have been approached as like, look, this is a moment, a time for you to redeem yourself, to tell your version of the story, and to explain your religious beliefs to people. So
I see.
I'm going to bring up some of the facts, not because I want to corner you, but because I want to, I want the viewers, and
To
people
hear your beliefs.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. All right, let me share with y'all some of the parts that were either concerning or curious or troubling to me. So one was this vision that they painted of Alex, Lori's brother, taking JJ outside the night he was murdered, and then bringing him back, quote, asleep. Do we know anything about that? Do we have theories about whether he would have harmed JJ while he took him out and brought him back after he had already passed away, or whether whatever violence may have happened, presumably by Alex, would have happened after he brought him back asleep? But just that whole idea of Alex being with him, taking him in and out as if he's asleep, was really chilling to me. What do we know about that? Do we know anything?
Yeah, no, I think there was a time when many speculated whether or not JJ was already passed at this moment. Was he really asleep, or was he dead? I think that early on in the case, that was people wondered, because we knew that story from David Warwick, that was the last time he and Melanie Gibbs saw JJ. But as evidence has sort of come out since then, in trial, in testimony, including David Warwick and Melanie Gibb being up in the middle of the night at 2, how JJ was found, that he struggled clearly. It seems as if JJ died most likely in the middle of the night, and that he really was carried up asleep at that moment, and then something horrendous happened hours later.
Okay, got it.
And I'll point out too that this is also why people wonder perhaps if Lori was around when JJ died, because the last known place people saw him was being laid asleep in Lori's bedroom. So I think that's where people really wonder if she was there.
Got it. And y'all jump in. I don't have to ask you each to comment on everything. Please just jump in if you've got anything else you want to add. I was disturbed when Lori was talking about her daughter's death. Like, life is like college. You go to college and then you come home from college, and life's that way too. Tylee came down to this earth, but then she went back to heaven, and that's kind of what life's all about. You come and you go. It felt a little bit flippant to me. Did any of y'all
that was really triggering to me, just because I've always had a problem with the way a lot of members of the church or the church, the Mormon church, encourages people to see death, or, for example, funerals. Like, and or most of the Mormon funerals I've gone, they're mostly about, talking about how it doesn't really matter because we're gonna see this person again. We know that we're sealed to them. So, like, there's not a lot of grieving. There's not a lot of um actually thoughtfulness about what has happened. And a lot of that sadness seems to be, if people sometimes show sadness, and they're Mormon, they can feel guilt for, maybe they don't really believe they're going to see this person again. And that Lori talking about life and death in that way kind of reminded me of that.
Especially when it's her own child.
Yeah.
Like I think all of us have experienced death of a loved one in some way or another. Even my parents, who are 90, who are believing Mormons, when I asked them about their own death, they're like, I don't want to die. So, like, who talks about some of their closest loved ones as if, like, oh yeah, they come, they go. That's just kind of what happens in life. It was very dark and chilling to me. So any other comments there? Should I go on?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Gerardo's, spot on, as, being raised Mormon and believing so heavily in an afterlife that is supposed to be um, so exponentially better than this life. It's something that we look forward to as sort of our reward for enduring the trials of this life. And I think that's where it is a little bit, it's easier to be dismissive of the death experience and to, sort of not see it as something tragic, but to see it as victorious. That being said, to have Lori talk about the death of her daughter, which she caused, which we can say because she's been convicted of it now, is incredibly disrespectful. It's horrible. It's horrific. I don't have enough words to say how evil and disgusting that is.
Yeah. Amen. Okay. The next part that was kind of disturbing to me was Tammy, and I've already kind of mentioned this, but Lori's saying, Tammy loves me and I love her, and we're going to be together for eternities. Like, I was trying to put myself in the shoes of Tammy's children, of Tammy's loved ones, and just how chilling and dark it would be for them to hear the woman who likely contributed to the murder of their sister, daughter, mom, etc., say, we're besties and she visits me all the time and we're besties for the eternities. Super dark to me. Again, jump in, or I can just keep reading these off.
I was gonna say, unfortunately, I don't know if it's Tammy's children that will be most upset by that, because I think they want to believe that their mother did die from natural causes. I can't speak for all of them, but I can speak that I know that some still believe that. And so to think that, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't upset them, but sometimes I'm upset that, I think that it might not upset all of them, but who it does upset is Tammy, the Douglas family, the extended family of Tammy, her Tammy's mother, who passed away between Lori's trial and Chad's trial. And that family, I cannot imagine her aunt, Vicky Hoban, who I am close to, Tam, is so angry that she would ever utter such things about her niece. Yeah, I can't imagine that, right? It's just twisting the knife. It's just like, why? So it is very upsetting. It's as upsetting as you think that it is. And then I want to point out, as far as what I think she is actually saying, I think she is implying my personal belief that there's some polygamy involved. I do believe that Lori might think they're going to be sister wives one day.
Gosh. Oh my goodness. Oh.
Yeah, I agree with that, Lauren. And I also think that Lori talking about Tammy being a friend, of course, it's disgusting and horrible. I think it's another way for Lori to deflect attention away from herself. If people believe that Tammy and Lori are friends, then Lori couldn't possibly have anything to do with Tammy's death. I think that's just part of that as well.
I also want to point this out because we forget sometimes about Julie Rowe and how big of a piece she played in this before, but how close she was to Chad Daybell and to Tammy. But she too said the same thing. And it's despicable. After the investigation had started to the deaths of Tammy Daybell and the missing children, Julie Rowe got on her live and said, I know that the kids are okay because I've seen them. And I know that Tammy is just fine and having a great reunion because she visits me. She's an angel. Tammy Daybell just adores me. She comes and visits me. She told me she's okay. She's totally chill and now here in the celestial kingdom. And she's so okay. I mean, this idea is just gross. I just want to point out that, what happened to people speaking for dead people, especially when there's an investigation going on, they might've been murdered and she was murdered. I don't know. It's like when a dead person can't speak for themselves and we're speaking for them, it's just wild. But a lot of people try to speak for Tammy Daybell who weren't her family after she died to claim that she wasn't murdered and she was okay. And that's just this whole other aspect of this story that's just sort of like.
Yeah, there's a mutual friend we have, Lauren, whose son died a few years back. And I was at the wake or the Shiva or the funeral, and I would watch people come up and say, your son visited me and he wanted me to let you know that he's okay and you don't need to worry and grieve about him. And I'm just thinking, on the one hand, I guess that's sweet and nice. On the other hand, if a son can visit anyone after he's died, shouldn't he visit the parents and not have random people from the funeral come up and say, your son is sending you love?
Exactly. And also, don't tell me about my dead relative. Actually, I would like to know that my dead relative is maybe sad and they're missing me and maybe they're not okay. I just don't even go there. Don't even tell me what my deceased loved one is saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Julie Rowe had to go back and recant supposedly what she saw, because she said that she saw the kids safe. She described, a beautiful room with palm trees. And I think she was trying to imply that she saw them in Hawaii. And then, of course, she had to later come back and say, well, I wasn't exactly sure of exactly where they were, but that's what I saw. And it could have been this other thing too. So, let's not put any stock by what Julie Rowe predicted.
Yeah. So the next part that was kind of just mind-blowing to me was when Keith calls her out for purchasing the wedding bands before Tammy's death. And her reaction was, get your facts straight, Keith. The rings were originally bought, for Alex and Zulema, and then we used them later, but you don't know what you're talking about, Keith. I don't mean to be repetitive there, but that was, it's just, if there were so many moments where they were just absolutely busted, and that's one of them, but it does just speak to that just willingness to just say anything. And it does call into question her sincerity about claiming to be visited by angels, because there's just no way those rings were intended for Alex and Zulema. She's making that up, right?
The ring size for Chad, I doubt is any similar to Alex ring size.
That's a good point.
Chad has very, very dainty hands, as we saw in his trial, and Alex's hands were not dainty for sure. And that was a moment, I think, where we saw Lori's mask slip a little bit, because she does get angry and combative and defensive when she's called out on this lie, that he's got the facts. Yes, we have the Amazon history. We have the dates. We know that you received the rings. There's nothing that manipulative people hate more than being confronted with an absolute truth.
Yes.
And so, of course, I think she had this story ready-made probably Although I wouldn't put it past her to be able to kind of like make this up on the fly. But I do think this probably was already in her mind, this dumb story about, oh, that was for Alex and Zulema. Never mind the fact that they didn't even tell Alex and Zulema to marry each other until much, much later on. So, you know, obviously it's not a real thing. She totally made it up. But, you know, this is what liars and manipulators do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She had a similar reaction on one of her calls with Melanie Gibb when Melanie kind of catches her on a lie or says or confronts her about lying, and she kind of storms and basically hangs up. I don't remember exactly the context, but I do remember the reaction.
I do.
Do you want to talk about it, Megan?
Yeah, so, you know, Melanie calls Chad and Lori and confronts them and says, you know, why did you tell the police that JJ was with me? You know, that was really, it makes me look really weird. It makes me look, you know, like I did something wrong. And, you know, then Melanie goes on to basically call Lori a Korah whore. And then Lori says, are you trying to wrest the scriptures? Are you trying to tell me, you know, what to do, or tell me that I'm the one who's manipulating or lying or whatever? Really calls her out. And yeah, they end up angry with each other. But what is so interesting to me about that phone call is that the entire time you can tell Lori's getting upset and angry, but the whole time both of them are saying, love you so much. I love you so much. Yeah, I love you. And I love you. And I just want you to be right. And I just want things to be good between us. You know, I don't want you to be mad at me. I'm not mad at you. I love you. And it's super triggering because this is what happens in my family all the time. It's like, I'm going to call you out for doing something wrong. And, you know, I'm not trying to offend you or upset you because I love you so much, but I just want you to know that I think this thing about you. It's just, it's just one of those tactics of like, we don't know how to handle conflict. We don't know how to talk to each other in a way that holds someone accountable for their behavior. And that's why Lori and Alex got away with what they got away with for their entire lives, because nobody ever had a conversation with them where they held them accountable for their actions, for their words, for their lies, for their manipulation, for anything that they did. Our family doesn't know how to have those conversations in a real and respectful way. They don't know how to communicate about conflict. And so you're going to see this sort of covering up of like, I'm going to tell you this thing, but I'm going to say that I love you so that you won't be offended and upset, because there is nothing scarier than abandonment, than having somebody not like you or not think well of you or not see you in a good light. And so that's the most threatening thing. And that's the thing that we're going to try to cover up and try to make sure doesn't ever happen, is that there's no rupture of our relationship and you still think I'm a good person at the end of every conversation.
Yeah.
Lauren.
Can we go here, Megan, I agree with you. I want to just quickly go back to the ring thing. The rings are important too, because I wish that Dateline, the rings that they purchased on Amazon, because I wish Dateline had brought this up too, that Lori and Chad Lori didn't just buy the ring. She kept returning them for different sizes too. We learned that, like, they were returned and resized. Like, you know, she didn't, you know, keep trying these on Alex's finger and Zulema's fingers. So they were resizing them. And I think in particular, actually, it was Chad's ring that had to keep getting smaller. So once again, you can't roll a tire, and his ring finger just kept getting smaller and smaller. And you know what they say. So it was clearly Chad's ring, as I just want to point out.
We just keep wanting to hate on Chad.
He's so likable.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's okay to hate on convicted killers.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Just going to put that out there.
For sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. I put a new poll up. First of all, we've got 4,400 people on this live stream, which is great. We're really grateful for this audience. You know, please, I'm just going to keep asking, please subscribe to the channel, Mormon Stories, along with Hidden True Crime, and third verse or midlife revolution, please like this episode and please comment on it, because that's really going to help us get these stories out and grow our respective channels. I put a new poll up, and I don't know if y'all have seen this yet, but the poll basically is asking if Chad and Lori had been Catholic or Presbyterian or Lutheran, do you think these murders would have happened? In other words, did these murders happen? Is the Mormonism aspect crucial to the story overall, and to the murders? So I'm not going to have us answer that because I'm going to come to that in just a second, but I definitely want to hear the audience's feedback. As of now, about 500 people have voted. 73% are saying no, the murders would not have happened basically if Lori and Chad had been like a basically Protestant Christians. In other words, it's the Mormon doctrine and theology and culture that were important tipping points to these people that clearly had issues actually becoming murderers. So I'm going to let the audience opine in the chats and with the poll before we as a panel discuss that. But I just wanted to put that out there as a teaser. Let me go to a couple more things that were disturbing to me. It was clearly disturbing when the investigator shows up and sees Alex and Chad unloading a pickup truck. And, he notices that Alex was nervous and he asks Chad for Lori's number. And Chad says he doesn't know Lori's number because the investigator's looking for Lori's children. That was deeply troubling. And it makes me feel like they certainly got the verdict right with convicting Chad of murder. There was also the evidence that once Lori and Chad know that investigators are looking for the children, that Chad calls Melanie and tells her not to pick up, and that Lori calls Melanie and says that she told the investigators that J.J. was with her, and that Melanie felt betrayed. But I was curious if y'all had reactions to those pieces of evidence. I know y'all know the story way better than me, but that stuff was just like guilty, 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 guilty. Anything y'all want to add to that? If not, I can just move to the next point. Anything?
Well, I think that was a telling moment, the detectives relating that they already knew that Lori and Chad were married. They already knew that Lori and Alex were super, super close as brother and sister. And yet when they ask Alex for the phone number, he says he doesn't have it. And Chad says, I don't know Lori very well. If that was me as an investigator, I would have been like, that's a super big red flag right there. That might have been a moment where I would have said, okay, everybody's lying to me at this point. So I think that was obviously super telling. And then, I hated seeing Melanie Gibb, by the way. It's very difficult for me to listen to her talk because I think she knows way, way more than she is ever going to be willing to say publicly. I think that she has a lot more information that could help us understand better what happened to the children and exactly when and those kinds of things. So it's hard for me to listen to her talk about the things that she will talk about because I have other things that I would love for her to say everything that she knows. However, I will just say I'm grateful for what she has told us. I'm grateful that she did finally come forward and tell the police, hey, I lied to you. I didn't really have JJ. But yeah, that was definitely another very telling time of them finding out that Chad called and said, hey, don't tell people, don't tell the police. JJ's with you. Don't tell him that we lied to you or whatever it was that they exactly said. Anyway.
Let's follow up on that because a lot of comments are coming in. One comment in particular, and I'm going to put this up as a poll. Valerie says, I will always feel Melanie Gibb may have saved the kids had she spoken up sooner. she knew being declared dark was a death sentence. A lot of other people are saying Melanie was complicit. You know, is that what do y'all think? Is Melanie potentially to blame, culpable? Nell Nelp says Melanie is culpable.
I mean, isn't there more people than Melanie, like, that were around the circle, like Sulema or what's the niece, Lori's niece? Lauren, you're muted.
Yeah, but there were only 2 people inside Lori's townhome when JJ was murdered. 2 people who were texting Lori and Chad in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. and then claiming later that they just had a bad nightmare. 2 people who knew JJ had been declared a zombie that night, knew something horrendous was happening, even tried to open Lori's door at 2 a.m. but found it locked. I will not be able to get over that, and I will never believe their story of just being asleep and waking up because David Warwick, you know, this middle-aged man had a nightmare and needed a blessing from Chad. And it was so intense, their need was so intense that they were, you know, wiggling Lori's door at 2 a.m. and texting them both. They knew exactly what was happening. And they have, you know, they've been protected to tell their story. And I will never, ever be okay with the many people. And I'm sorry to Gerardo, I'm sorry to like cut you off. This stuff, like clearly that was like all emotion on my part to cut you off, Gerardo. I'm sorry because like I get so angry. But going back to what you were saying before I cut you off, Gerardo, and you can start again, is yes, there were many people, Zulema, many people involved that did nothing. But Melanie Gibb even had Charles coming to her crying. She shared this on a recorded phone call with Sherry Dottle. And she said, yeah, Charles came to me crying, you know, not knowing what to do. And I said, I didn't know what to tell him. You know, he said, help me, but I didn't know. And then Sherry Dottle says, well, did Lori kill Charles Vallow? And she said, well, yeah, but you know, for self-defense reasons. But yeah. And then Zulema, going back to Gerardo, what you're saying, Zulema saying, that it was a Nephi and Laban ending to Charles's death. So many people knew that carried this belief system and did nothing. And I'll let you finish now, Gerardo. Sorry, that was like pure like rage.
So are we saying Melanie? Are we saying Melanie probably knew the kids were going to die and did nothing?
Oh,
that's what I'm saying.
Go ahead, Lori. What?
No, that's what I just said, and I will boldly state that.
Because that
we say these are our opinions. These are our opinions.
These are our opinions. This is my opinion. So, this is my opinion and my speculation. Looking at all of the evidence, sitting in both trials, watching all of Melanie Gibbs' full police interviews that she gave that are on YouTube, watching her testimony, knowing her alibi, seeing the inside of this townhome on video, knowing that it wasn't big, knowing that they were there, listening to the podcast they gave that night. It is absolute speculation. I wasn't there, but it is speculation with a lot of evidence that I have heard over the years. I do believe she knew the children were in danger.
That's so dark.
I agree. I totally
Yeah,
agree.
Go ahead, Megan.
I think all of the people who called themselves the Seven Gatherers or whatever, you know, all of the people who were in that inner circle who were doing castings on Charles, that's the part of Lori's trial, of this trial, that I want to know all the information about how much they knew, when they knew it, just prior to Charles's death, and then after Charles's death as well, their behavior, the way that they acted and interacted with each other, what communication went back and forth, because I absolutely believe that they knew that when Chad said someone was dark, it meant death, especially after Charles. And so anybody who was doing a casting for the kids or who heard Lori or Chad refer to either one of the children as dark, I think they absolutely knew what was going to happen, and they did nothing and they said nothing. And I wish that they would all be held accountable. But as I always have to point out on my channel, is that law enforcement, prosecutors, they're always going to look at likelihood of conviction. And they've already got convictions in these 3 murders, you know, and so they're probably not going to take a look at Zulema and both of the Melanies for prosecution for those reasons, which is infuriating. But it is my opinion as well that they absolutely knew, they absolutely could have done something, they could have said something, they could have spoken up, and they chose not to. And I think the reason they chose not to is because that would have meant losing their status in this little cult and losing face and possibly confronting the fact that they're believing in stuff that's not real, and they have to deal with the fact that they've been duped and they've been manipulated and they've been lied to. And while that is a difficult thing to admit, what's the alternative? The alternative is that people die.
Yeah.
Period.
Absolutely. Well, that's just dark, and it's kind of unthinkable that people can get in this kind of fantasy mindset where they're doing the Lord's work and they're aware that children are going to die and they just choose not to do anything. I just can't even imagine it. I put out the poll. We're doing a lot of polls today. I put out the poll. Did Melanie Gibb know the children would be murdered and opted to do nothing? So far, 300 people have voted and 86% say yes. Wow. They believe that Melanie Gibb knew the children would be murdered and opted to do nothing, which is just kind of sickening and mind-blowing.
Do we know if she received any kind of immunity to testify or no? We don't know. Or
I don't think we know for sure. I think there's been speculation that both Zulema and Melanie were offered some kind of immunity, but I don't know. Lauren, do you know anything?
I think it came out in trial that she was offered.
Oh wow.
Immunity.
That Zulema was, or Melanie, or both?
Melanie, possibly Zulema too.
Okay.
Actually, let me take that back on Zulema. I don't know.
Yeah.
My memory is not good enough to say. If anybody knows in comments, I probably knew one time and I'm drawing a blank.
So the next part, and I think no one's ever going to be able to dissuade me of my opinion here. I'm waiting for the part, and again, the facts of this case come and go for me because I just haven't been able to internalize them, fortunately, unfortunately, as much as y'all have. But I was waiting for the point where Alex dies and somebody is blamed and even arrested for Alex's murder. And instead, what the narrative said in this show was that Alex just randomly, Lori's brother, I should say, who is likely the murderer of several people, Alex collapses and dies. And I'm thinking, surely Zulema was going to be convicted for Alex's death. And instead, they just say Alex died of natural causes, likely blood clots. And I'm just going to say, in my mind, there is a 0% chance that Alex dies of natural causes. It has to be that he was poisoned under Lori and or Chad's direction to get the witness, murderer witness out of the way. And yet the show just wanted me to believe that he just randomly, magically died of blood clots. Do y'all have opinions about this? Am I crazy? Or are there legitimate suspicions that he was murdered and they just didn't want to say it? Or what? Help me out here, y'all.
Legitimate suspicions, even as much as the prosecution bringing it up in trial. We heard a really fascinating piece of evidence at Chad Daybell's trial this last year, where we can call them the Ian Pulowski tapes. And Ian, who married Melanie, the niece of Lori Vallow. So Melanie is somebody else that I think has, been speculated that she should have also been charged or arrested. That's also been speculated. So she was the ex-wife of Brandon Boudreaux. So Ian Pulowski marries Melanie, and then Ian Pulowski is like, wait a minute, what did I just marry into? Freaks out after the attempted murder of Brandon, goes to police, suggests that he is afraid children are in danger. Melanie Gibb then goes to police. They all start talking at the same time. I wonder why. because they all know. So within one day, Melanie Pulowski, Ian Pulowski, and Melanie Gibb are all talking to police. Like once one person snitches, they all snitch. So they all start going to police. And Ian Pulowski, like allegedly terrified about what he's just gotten himself into, says to FBI, you know what? I will start secretly recording my new wife and all of her friends and Chad. And he does that. And we heard some of those recordings at the trial. And one of them is the day after Alex Cox dies. And there, to me, it sounds like an absolute cover up. Chad is on the phone and everybody's talking and everybody's saying like, just do you have his belongings? Did you get this? Or you got this? Like, and then Melanie Pulowski says something like, well, I don't want Brandon to know that Alex just died because it's going to give him some ammo, and let's just keep this on the DL. I mean, that was the moment where I thought if there was any doubt in my mind, which there was some doubt, weird coincidences happened, hearing that recording at trial erased all that doubt.
Yeah.
Gerardo.
I just asked ChatGPT, which, take it for whatever it's worth, is ChatGPT, if pulmonary embolism can be made to look natural. And the answer, according to this, is yes. And it could be nearly undetectable in an autopsy. There are several ways a person could be covertly induced into developing a pulmonary embolism, which was what was determined to be the cause of Alex Cox's death. And he says possible external induction, like administering a procoagulant drug or substance. And certain drugs or toxin can increase blood clotting. And basically, it gives several options, but it basically says that all of these would be nearly undetectable in an autopsy. So, and we know that there was some talk about, Chad saying before Alex died, kind of getting him prepared or trying to convince him that his time on this earth had or where it was coming to an end.
Wasn't it some type of patriarchal blessing?
Yeah.
Yep.
Priesthood blessing kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You will never ever be able to convince me that Alex's death was natural.
Yeah.
Not ever. One day after Tammy's body was exhumed, immediately after this patriarchal blessing that Chad gave him that basically told him that he'd done his work well and that it was okay for him to move on to the next life or to the next mission, was the implication. It was a bilateral pulmonary embolism, meaning in both lungs. And okay, I will say, yes, in the family, there is somewhat of a history of blood clots. Lori and Alex's, my grandmother, Novelle, died of a brain aneurysm. So there was some speculation in the family about that. However, again, Gerardo is correct. There are lots and lots of ways that a pulmonary embolism could be caused that would be undetectable. And just to silence everybody who's speculating in the chat, yes, Alex had an autopsy. Yes, it was ruled natural causes due to bilateral pulmonary embolism. Yes, his body was cremated, but they did reserve blood and tissue samples in case they needed to test something in the future. But you can't just do, and yes, a tox panel was done, but you can't just do a tox screening for everything. There's a general panel that they do that's standard for autopsies. But if you want to look for a specific toxin or a specific drug or a specific poison, you have to specify that you want that specific thing to be tested, and they can't just test for everything. So yes, 100%, there's a possibility that someone could have introduced some kind of toxin into his food or his bloodstream, or he could have done it himself, that would have caused him to have pulmonary embolism, and then it would be undetectable. So the timing of it is way too suspicious. For people saying he was young and healthy, he was 51, he was an over-the-road trucker. So that's kind of what, some other people have said that, when you're an over-the-road trucker, you can get DVT, which can cause blood clots and things like that. Okay, fine. But he was a killer who was directly responsible for the deaths of several people directly involved. And then, he was saying to Zulema, I think I might be their fall guy. And then a day later, he's dead. So that to me is just, there's too many things in there that it's not a coincidence anymore.
All right. That's good. Because I felt like I was losing touch with reality for a second.
We all do whenever we look at the case. It's just like, what kind of a world am I living in where this kind of stuff is possible?
Yeah. So, and y'all jump in anytime if you got something else you want to say. So when they got to the point about them sitting by the pool, obviously I was hoping that they were going to mention the Visions of Glory book that was under Lori's knee. There was no mention of the Visions of Glory book. I can totally understand that a secular national news story is going to have to keep the story focused, and that maybe that's a detail that they did a rabbit hole they didn't want to go down. But Lauren, you're raising your finger. Jump in, Lauren.
Keith did ask me a lot of questions about Visions of Glory.
Oh, wow.
And we did talk, and I read from the book, and he did talk about putting it in. I did hear before they didn't have room, but I do think that they were planning on it originally.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Because that's, I don't think we ever want to do an episode without calling out the fact that the one through line, well, there are a couple through lines through the Tim Ballard story, the Ruby, Frankie, and Joe, story, and the Chad and Lori Daybell story. I guess one through line is Jody Hildebrandt, but another through line is the Visions of Glory book and Tom Harrison. And until that book gets stamped out and killed and denounced and burned, and Tom Harrison is punished, not that we want anyone to be punished per se, but I think we all will continue agreeing that maybe our band should be called Visions of Glory, because until that book goes away, we're going to keep seeing true crime things happening. And a lot of this stuff comes from that book, that awful book that we know Tom Harrison is behind. Any disagreement or comments on that, or should I keep going? Got a couple more things.
I think we've done 8 hours on the book, but I'm always gonna call it out because it is harmful. It is tied to all these other people who have done horrible, atrocious things. And there are still people out there who think it's a great book. There are a couple of YouTube channels out there right now where they read the book and talk about it. And, I think I've addressed this somewhere, but I don't remember where. So forgive me if I'm repeating myself. But I think one of the reasons why Mormons especially like that book is because it validates some of their beliefs and it makes them feel a little bit better about believing the way that they do about the end times and about, the life after this one. So I think people who like it are biased to like it because it confirms the things that they believe, but there's so much harmful in it. And again, it glorifies justifiable homicide, just like the Book of Mormon does. I just think Visions of Glory needs to go away forever.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, it's sort of this apocalyptic Mormon Christian fan fiction end of times scenario from a Mormon perspective, where calamity comes to the earth and people who store up food and weapons and ammunition are saved, and they all culminated in Salt Lake City, and Jesus and Joseph Smith come to the temple that's in rubbles or the visitor center, and it's just a millennial Mormon / Christian apocalypse porn wrapped into a book that unfortunately just a lot of people believe. So
I'm seeing a comment by Rose here, and she says nothing is harmful in the book. What about the part I read to Keith Morrison where it says that in the last days we get to act as God and kill people if we see that they're dark? I mean, that's kind of like, not the greatest. And of course, go ahead.
What a ridiculous position Rose has. I like to be respectful to my viewers and listeners. Rose says nothing is harmful in the book.
Okay, let me just say the quote then. Okay, let me just say the quote from the end of the book that says, as they were going around gathering people, they would come up against these groups that would want to fight them and would want to combat them. And they could tell whether or not those groups of people were righteous. They could tell whether or not those groups of people were going to repent or not. So here you have someone who's not God, who's not Jesus, judging the hearts and the intents of other people. And if that was not bad enough, what they say is that we could tell if they were past feeling, if they were not going to repent. And if they were not going to repent, we were free to deliver them from mortality. In other words, we were free to kill them if we believed they were never going to repent. And their death would be a blessing to them, because then they couldn't rack up any more sin on their divine ledger. If that's not harmful, explain to me how. It makes me angry.
We lit up Megan. Megan's on fire. We got caffeinated Megan here.
You have angry Megan. You have Megan who has listened to people try to defend and justify this book that literally says it's okay to kill people. My family members are dead because of that book. Tell me how that's okay. It's not.
Yeah.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you. All right. Well, I'll jump now to, for me, one of the most bothersome parts of the whole interview. I think it was when an investigator was being interviewed towards the end, and he said this crime was about money, sex, and power, and that religion was only tangential. Y'all probably knew that I was going to not like that. I'm going to just highlight really quickly the Mormon teachings that I think, some of the Mormon teachings that I think contributed to these murders. The belief that Mormons are special, that they're special above all other people on the world, and that individuals can be so special that they're favorites of God, chosen to usher in the second coming. Like, that is very Mormon. It comes from Isaiah. It comes from the Doctrine and Covenants, the whole one mighty and strong stuff, and just the whole Mormon Christian exceptionalism stuff. I think that contributes to Chad and Lori's delusions. I think the belief in Mormonism that your thoughts and feelings are the Holy Ghost, that comes right out of the Book of Mormon when Nephi is told to chop Laban's head off because he gets the thought or the feeling that he should. This idea that the Holy Ghost speaks to you through your thoughts and your feelings is absolutely a recipe for crime and murder, because we all have dangerous or disturbing thoughts. As someone who has a PhD in psychology, who studied OCD, we have all of us have horrendous thoughts that come into our brain, or horrendous feelings that come into our mind at one point or another. And if at any point we're under the delusion that those might be God or divine angels speaking to us, horrible things can happen just by that alone. The idea that our bodies can be possessed by evil spirits, which then led to the zombie derivation doctrine, was clearly behind this. If there wasn't the belief that evil spirits are among us and that they can possess bodies, which is a very Mormon and a very Christian teaching, which is also very much reinforced in the Visions of Glory book, by the way, but Jesus himself teaches it in the New Testament. It's in the Doctrine and Covenants. It's in the Mormon temple ceremony. Joseph Smith taught it himself. Without the teaching of demonic and spirit possession, these murders very well might not have happened. The idea that death is no big deal, that we should celebrate death because we get to go to a better place in the afterlife, that comes straight from Joseph Smith, and it dismisses the value of life if the next life is more precious. I was a 15-year-old thinking, wait, let me get this straight. If we murder babies before they come to this earth, according to Joseph Smith, they all go immediately to the celestial kingdom. But if we let all those babies mature to adulthood and then they sin and then they don't go to the celestial kingdom, the most charitable thing we can do with babies is murder them to guarantee their, and I thought that as a faithful Orthodox believing Mormon 14 or 15-year-old. So the idea that death has no sting is absolutely a Mormon and a Christian doctrine, and I think it helps contribute to these types of crimes and murders. The idea that we all lived as spirits before we came here, and that there might be multiple mortal probations, that we could live on the earth multiple times, and the idea that there's polygamy, those are all mortal teachings. Those are all very Mormon teachings. Joseph Smith not only taught polygamy, he practiced it. Mormon apostles, prophets, seers, and revelators have taught about probations and about eternal progression. Again, without the teachings of polygamy, without the teachings of spirit, eternal progression, Lori and Chad wouldn't have been able to have these deluded beliefs that maybe they knew each other in former lives, and that maybe they were meant to be together with Tammy in some sort of celestial, throuple. Those teachings wouldn't have been possible without Joseph Smith's teachings of polygamy and eternal progression and spirit persistence in the plan of salvation. The idea that any of us could have spiritual powers to speak with the dead, to know the future, to know God's will, just that teaching of spiritual power, or that we can get visits from God or Jesus, gives people too much power to then be able to prey on other vulnerable people, like Chad clearly likely did with Lori and others, saying, I speak with God, I have special powers, I'm the one mighty and strong, I have spiritual gifts, you need to listen to me. This very well might not have happened if there weren't the belief about spiritual gifts. And basically religions that denounce evidence, that denounce reality, and that instead prop up supernatural spiritual worldviews, predisposes religious believers to devalue and dismiss evidence, and instead to have conspiratorial mindsets that are not rooted in evidence and rooted in reality, but are instead rooted in spiritual psychological fantasy. Those are at play here. And then finally, it's very Mormon to believe, even though the Articles of Faith says we believe in honoring, obeying, and sustaining the law, the Mormon Church has a long history of disobeying the law and believing that prophets, seers, revelators in the church are above the law. And whether that's the secret polygamy that was going on, the post-manifesto polygamy, this idea of bleeding the beast, there's a long history of lying for the Lord. Gerardo, were you going to jump in and say something?
The SEC violations.
Yeah, the SEC violations, the Ensign Peak hiding our wealth from the members and from the world, masking and deceiving the IRS and the SEC with its finances. The Mormon Church has a long history of deceiving and lying and breaking the law, thinking that God's ways and the prophets' ways are higher, and the Lord's ways are higher than man's ways. And if that's all true, then why wouldn't members believe that they can also violate, deceive, break the law, and lie for the Lord when they get these thoughts and these impressions that come into their brain? So in all of these ways, and in many, many more, I do not think these murders happen with schlubby Chad Daybell and, we want to say Vixen Lori Vallow. Like, otherwise they're just pedestrian kind of loser people that are broken and fraudulent and marginalized and discredited. It's the secret ingredient of super dangerous, and I would add deadly, theological, spiritual, and religious beliefs that that turn this series of events from just silly prepper apocalyptic LARPing to the death of at least 4, if not more, 4, 5, 6 people. That's my view. It seems like over 70% of you voted that these murders would not have happened without the Mormon component. That's my rant. Sorry, I went on that rant. Who wants to jump in and disagree with me or agree with me or share your own perspectives?
Well,
I get
I'll
one
just
rant.
say,
Can I have one rant per episode?
I love your rants, John. I will just say that lots of people have asked me, you know, does Lori get here without Chad? Does Chad get here without Lori? And I think the answer to that is it's hard to say, of course, right? You know, I think Lori had always talked about the next life being better. She, you know, Colby detailed the story where she talked about driving all three of them off a cliff. And Tylee saying, yeah, go ahead and do it, Mom, because she was young enough where she didn't really understand the implications of that. So does Lori get here without Chad? I think it's really possible, yes. I can't answer whether Chad gets there without Lori, but I don't think either one of them gets there without the beliefs that you just described, John. So I'm just going to agree with you in that way.
Lauren and Gerardo, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Unless you want to go first, Gerardo.
You can go. You can
Go ahead, Lauren.
I hear you, John. I think it was so funny because I was actually making a list of very specific LDS beliefs, but you did a much more thorough list than I did. So I concur with what you state are the concerning beliefs. I also want to take it further, though, and this is an interesting part for me because I'm going to get those that are ex-LDS thinking I'm an apologist, and those that are of any other Christian denomination, they're going to be offended by this. But I want to broaden this. I am actually not going to be an apologist for the LDS Church because I don't think anyone should ever be an apologist when children are being murdered. And I actually concur with what you said, John. But here's my but.
I love it.
I don't think I could not say that this goes further than LDS beliefs. I want to read to you guys some headlines. This is Thursday, May 12th, 2022. Mother accused of killing her children in West Hills, California, believed they were possessed by demons. Beautiful woman, blonde, looks just like Lori. Accused of killing her 3 young children inside her West Hills, California home, believing they were possessed by demons. Her teenage son helped her do it. We have Matthew Coleman, a surf teacher who killed both of his children by taking them across the border. San Diego surf teacher to cross the border to Mexico, killing them both because they had serpent DNA. And we have a young girl. This was one we covered. Heartbreaking. Claudia Hernandez murdered her child Arlie was her name. She was 3 years old, along with her father and brother in a hours-long exorcism inside of the church that the family owned, and tortured her and forcibly grabbed her neck, torso back, smothering her repeatedly, tried to pry open her mouth to remove the demon, and killed her. So my point being is, and I brought up terrorism and extreme beliefs. If we pinpoint extreme beliefs to one religion, we're not doing justice to extreme beliefs in general. And thus I am broadening the criticism. I am not excusing it, because it is not okay to see this happening over and over and over again. But extreme beliefs are dangerous, and they seem to be more prominent these days with conspiracy theories online and not seeing evidence for what it is. And it is in the Bible that children are possessed. And it is in QAnon beliefs that demon serpent DNA exists. Their extreme beliefs are happening, and if we don't look at evidence, I just feel like it's a broader conversation to discuss, and Christianity is susceptible. Any religion is susceptible to extreme beliefs. And when you start to believe in magical thinking, anything, crime can and does happen over and over and over again. And that's why I'm broadening this conversation, because it's not okay. And religions are susceptible to this. And I'm not discounting the specific LDS theology, John, that you brought up, but I do want to say there's theology in many sects of Christianity, and they should not be discounted.
Absolutely. Amen. And there can be new age woo, new age weirdness that can lead to apocalyptic things. Non-Christian traditions can also have it. Secular people can have dangerous views. So it's not like I'm even anti-religion. I think we all just want to see religions clean up their act, get rid of the harm, and then just keep doing good. I think we all have that motivation. I don't think any of us consider ourselves anti-Mormon or anti-Christian. I just think we want to see less harm being done.
I know, just like this, J.J. Smith, don't lump Jesus Christ into this mess. No, I am. He removed serpent. He removed Jesus Christ. And I have identified as a Christian myself in other episodes. He did exorcisms on people, and he removed evil spirits. And if we can't look at this in a broader area, if you are putting your blinders on and deciding that it is only one thing to blame, then you're doing a disservice to this issue as a whole. I hope that all of us are humble enough to look at our own belief system here and to see how maybe we can step back and realize that any belief system can be very dangerous. It can also be beautiful. Christ also taught love one another and to not judge. He also did exorcisms. So I just think we need to be honest with what we believe and how in the wrong hands, beliefs can be extreme and very dangerous.
Yeah. And I'll just, that's so powerful. And you are a Christian, Lauren. So it's not like you're hating on Christ. And by the way, for those who haven't thought about this a little bit, you can still believe Jesus was divine, but maybe just whoever wrote the Bible got that story about Jesus casting the evil spirits out of the man, and then the evil spirits going to the pigs, and then the pigs run off the cliff. Like, you can still believe Jesus was divine and just say, hey, maybe whoever wrote the Bible got that story wrong. Maybe they interpreted it wrong.
Yeah, it's interpretation. It's interpretation, and trust me, the LDS faith that I was raised in never talked about harming children or casting, demons in children. I know, and I'm talking for myself, not others in the LDS faith. So let me clarify. Like, that was my interpretation growing up. That doesn't mean others weren't taught those beliefs. But as you point out, it's all interpretation, and we just have to understand that extreme beliefs start in a magical belief system, and it might be interpretation. And if it's interpretation, are you interpreting it wrong? If it's interpretation, should we process this together and talk about this and explain how one belief that might be beautiful to you and make your life better could be really damaging to somebody else? That's a conversation to be had.
Yeah, we have to be able to have it. Well said.
I agree. And I just want to add to what you're saying, Lauren, too, that, I totally agree with what you're saying. And thank you for the challenge for all of us to examine our beliefs and to see where they might be harmful to someone else. I guarantee you, every single one of us has a belief right now, whether it's religious or otherwise, that's harmful or damaging to someone else. The other thing I want to point out is that religion, and particularly high demand religion, is dangerous in the hands of mentally ill people. And so I will just say, people with personality disorders, people with narcissistic tendencies, people with traits of narcissism, all of those people are going to have an element of extremism to any religion that they come to. And so, that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about educating people about narcissism and manipulation and coercive control tactics, because in the hands of the wrong people, religion and other high demand systems can become really problematic for people with these types of traits. So we need to all be aware of what the traits are and how to defend against them. And we all need to be aware of our own traits that tend to narcissism. We all have jealousy, spite, anger, all of these things that made Lori and Chad what they are. We all have elements of that in ourselves. And if we don't confront those traits and address them and learn how to be healthier and to interact in healthier ways with people, we're all in danger of harming someone.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And sorry, I just keep going back. I think this is maybe just like, I just want to say this too. There was somebody, it was pointed out in the chat, and I'm going to read it. Rose, I think we called Rose out earlier, but I actually have compassion for this comment. Rose, she says, is Lauren LDS? Is she not going to stand up for our faith? And so I want to say something too. I think I might be the only one that still remains LDS with my membership here. Not that I want to really talk too much about my personal beliefs. It's something I steer clear of. I just always make it known sort of when covering this case, because I feel it's only fair to be journalistic and honest. The LDS faith that I grew up in could never have fathomed this case. And if you want to know why I have been, you can call it obsessed with this case for 5.5 years, it's because when I opened the first AP article that I read, that was The Wire, it came down that there were missing children. I saw a Desirous book author and a beautiful blonde woman who looked like all of my friends' moms growing up. And they were like, we're looking for these two and they're missing children. I thought, what in the world? And I couldn't, that was December 2019. And I, at that moment, realized I have to figure this out and I have to understand it, because there is no way that this is happening in the faith that I know and that I love, that gave me comfort as a child, that made me feel like Jesus Christ loved me, and that, my family was going to be together forever and taught to be kind. And we're all brothers and sisters. Like, this is foreign to me. And so for the past 5.5 years, I have been trying to understand this to the point where we're here today. And I have been a true journalist, and I have discovered all of those things you just stated, John, that are my beliefs that I grew up with, that like maybe I didn't process, that I refused to see, that I had blinders on. And I have found some deep humility in the way that I was raised versus other people, versus what my faith really did and does teach. And I have opened myself to understanding how certain beliefs that I maybe thought were beautiful can actually be really, really harmful. And that's been really valuable for me. And I would hope that anyone here with any belief they have, whether you are evangelical or Mormon or ex-Mormon, that like we have enough humility when people are starting to be harmed over and over and over again, that we take a look at how, even if it would never affect us, and even if the book Visions of Glory inspired you, because I think it has inspired people, and they didn't read that one, thing. And even if the Book of Mormon has inspired you, Laban and Lemuel, and that story is in there too. It's problematic. The Bible has a lot of problematic stories. Like, even if you think, no, it's the other person's problem. It's the Mormons who aren't Christian. It's, this crazy offshoot of Mormonism. It's Christianity. I mean, it's so easy to say that it's not our belief. And I would just hope that if children are being murdered over and over again, and I read you a lot of headlines from a lot of different faiths, that maybe we just sit back and eat some humble pie and process how extreme beliefs happen, and how maybe we can not be part of the problem, but help it.
Love it. Amen. Lots of love
you,
coming
Lauren.
in the comments for you, Lauren, and for you, Megan. Gerardo, you can't get away without sharing your views on the Mormon Christian angle here. So give it to us.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's very little extra that I could say other than just agree with everybody here that definitely Mormonism played a key role in all of this, and the teachings, and Lori and Chad's theology could not have been possible if Mormonism wasn't there. And Mormonism was kind of had this perfect recipe with the perfect key elements to sustain a more crazy narrative or advanced theology that Chad created, and that Lori believed in, and that others believed in, like Sulema and Alex and Melanie. They all believed in it, and they all were raised in mainstream LDS. So there was something there that brought this to happen, and I agree with Lauren that there are these type of cases in a lot of other religions as well. It is kind of interesting that Mormonism keeps breeding this type of people. We have Ruby Frankie, Jody Hildebrand, and others. We don't go by a few months without seeing a headline of a Mormon killing their spouse, and those sort of cases. So,
and Gerardo, if I could just add, I've had many clients come to me and tell me that, either they received revelation that their spouse was going to die,
right,
or their spouse received revelation that they were going to die. For some reason, it's very, very common in Mormonism for spouses to receive revelation that the other is going to die, and oftentimes to have insurance policies accordingly. I just want to say it happens a lot, not to mention all these deaths of wives of Mormon dentists, you know what I mean, orthodontists. But go ahead, Gerardo. I just want to throw it in there.
Yeah. Well, that's all. That's all I
okay.
I wanted to add.
Okay.
Yeah.
One piece that I think was alluded to that I would add to my rant is the belief that the response to the behavior that is coming from allegedly demonic possession isn't taking them to the ER or to the behavioral health unit or to the psychiatrist. It's priesthood blessings. Like, we know that Jody Hildebrand, when she claimed she was having demonic possessions, they didn't take her to the uni up at the University of Utah to admit her to the psych ward. What did they do? They called the Mormon bishop, and the Mormon bishop tried to heal her, and he couldn't. We know that they were calling Brad, I always forget his name. What's the young men's presidency member?
Brad Wilcox.
They were calling Brad Wilcox. They were calling Jeremy Yagi, a general authority for the Mormon Church. They were having Kevin Frankie perform priesthood blessings. If you or your loved one is experiencing demonic possession, take them to the ER. Take them to the behavioral health unit at your local hospital. Do not call your ministering elders. Do not call your home teachers. Don't call your bishop. Don't call grandpa. Don't call the patriarch. Take them to the ER. You can save a life that way. Those children of Ruby Frankie's may not have been tortured if Jody Hildebrand had been taken to the uni at the University of Utah. And these children and these adults may not have died if Zulema or Melanie or whoever, once they heard Chad or Lori talking about spirits and possessions and light and dark and zombies, if they just hadn't been turned into the police or taken to the loony bin, to the mental health units. I think we've made the point. Okay. To close out this interview, there are a couple other dark or weird things that I noted. One was just this revelation that for both the deaths of J.J. and Tylee, the investigators felt like they were two-person jobs. Was that probably wasn't news to any of you? Is that correct? that for everyone on the panel, it was pretty obvious that both of those murders were likely to be, and probably, I don't know about Tammy, but did y'all agree that both the JJ and the Tylee murders were likely two people jobs?
Yes.
Yes, and they said that about Tammy as well. And my Uncle Rex pointed out that Alex was pretty incompetent unless he had help, and so he was alone in the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux. He was alone in the initial attempted shooting of Tammy, and he messed both of those up. But anytime he had help, he was successful.
Wow, that's a good point.
Anything you want to add to that, Lauren?
No. Yeah. What Megan said.
I'm getting called out for using the term loony bin. It's just a little bit of rhetoric. Of course, I mean, like I said, the behavioral health unit of your local hospital or a psychiatrist. I was doing a little bit of rhetoric.
The quack house. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. There you go. Sorry.
What about the part where Lori says to Keith, when I'm proven to be right, I'm going to tell you I told you so. So there was sort of this hubris that she had. Maybe we've already made enough points about Lori, but there's that just moment where she's like, someday when you see that I'm right, Jesus is going to save me and Chad, and then I'm going to say I told you so, Keith. That was just a little bit over the top for me.
Yeah.
Maybe we've already made that point enough. Feel free.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I mean, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, please, Megan.
No, I just want to say, yeah. I mean, yeah, we've made the point. So sorry.
Yeah. And then maybe really disturbing was the end when there's this joke about dancing and Keith says you're very good at dancing, I think, to Lori. And Lori basically says, when I'm exonerated, when all this is over, maybe I'll go on Dancing with the Stars. Like, we're talking about deaths of her own children, of people close to her own former husband, of other people. To make jokes about going on Dancing with the Stars was just so dark. It was such a powerful way to end the interview.
It also made me wonder if she has been following or heard about these other type of fraudster figures, like Anna Delvey, who have gone out of jail and go in Dancing with the Stars. But that's just something I wonder when she said that.
Yeah, it's just another testament to me that she really believes that people love her, and that she really believes that she's going to be exonerated, get out of prison someday, and be a celebrity, and everyone's going to worship her.
Yeah.
Lauren, any other final comments regarding any of that?
No,
Okay.
concur.
Something that we didn't touch, John, was the idea when she denies the doctrine of light and dark and zombies. Didn't that happen where she's asking, she says, no, we don't believe that, or that didn't happen. Chad didn't rate people as light or dark.
I did notice that. I just chalked that up to her lying and denying all the facts. Lauren and Megan, did y'all have any other reactions to that?
It was interesting. If anything, I think it shows a little bit of even more deception with her, because she did once mention, she mentioned in Colby's interview with him too, that she's like, I've never mentioned zombies. That's not my thing. And if you look back at her text, she'll refer to them as Z's.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, was she really trying to avoid responsibility here? Like, she knew what that meant and she wasn't texting it because she certainly believed in it. We've had witnesses testifying, like Melanie Gibbs, that she actually absolutely called Tylee a zombie, and that Melanie Gibb was there when Chad Daybell called Lori to say, hey, by the way, Charles Vallow is Ned Schneider, in other words, a zombie. So I think it's kind of fascinating to think, like, is she just trying to avoid that word? And then the light and dark scale that was taught to her, I think, by Chad. We have emails from Chad, and it says, per your request, Lori, here's your whole family history. And then he labels each person light or dark, complete with decimal points. And it starts with like, this is what you requested. So if she's not openly preaching it, she certainly believes it. But I have wondered, like, is she trying to avoid talking about light and dark and zombies to kind of claim like she doesn't believe this? It's an interesting idea.
There's also this would be speculative, of course, and maybe a little bit conspiratorial, but it did remind me a little bit of when the LDS Church on their website says, we don't believe that people are going to have their own planets, kind of things, or like the idea that when you're talking to other people about your theology, you have to talk to them about the milk before the meat, because if you talk about these terms like that, they're not going to understand it because they're not spiritual enough,
or it'll make the church look bad, right?
Yeah, so there's this kind of denial, even though they actually believe that they might become gods and create their own planets.
Yeah. All right, well, really quickly, what can we see? Lori's going to be representing herself in this trial coming up. Lauren and Megan, I imagine y'all will be covering it closely. We'd love to have you back at important points. We, of course, want to remind everyone to please subscribe to Hidden True Crime YouTube channel. Please subscribe to Third Verse / Midlife Revolution, Megan Connor YouTube channel. They're both important channels. Please support their good work. Lauren and Megan, will y'all be covering, I imagine, Lori's trial? And is there anything you want to say about the prospects, knowing that she's going to be representing herself?
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing up the trial. I think that a lot of people are very fascinated for stuff, I want to say, because Lori is representing herself, and that's certainly intriguing. I'm just with everyone else, like, this is going to be quite the show. Like, what is going to happen? But I also think this is about justice for Charles Vallow. And some people say, well, it doesn't matter because she's behind bars forever. I mean, justice is a theological, this justice isn't necessarily like, oh, she's behind bars forever. What's this going to do? Is she going to be punished more? Justice isn't about punishment. Justice is about the belief in like acknowledging that what happened to Charles, isn't okay. And for her to be being held responsible, whether she's already serving 3 consecutive life sentences or not. And Charles Vallow sounded the alarm. And if people had listened to him, he, J.J. and Tylee would still be alive. And Kay Woodcock, that is Charles Vallow's sister, she has stated, he was the first one murdered, but she has stated that Charles would have wanted it this way. He would have said, make sure that Tylee and J.J. and the children and Tammy get justice first, worry about me later. And that would have been what Charles would have said and who he was. And this trial is important for justice for Charles. And I also think that we might see some really different evidence in this trial. The evidence that has come out already of Chandler, Arizona and Gilbert, Arizona is much different than what the evidence is in Idaho. You have text messages between the Cox families, Summer and Janice and Lori, all discussing and seemingly possibly what did they know, what did they not know. It's going to be very interesting. And of course, with Lori representing herself, I'm very intrigued. I haven't seen her get angry in court yet, but seeing how angry she got towards Keith Morrison, asking all of the questions we want to know. I wonder how long it's going to be before she loses it in court. So yeah, I plan to be there. I'm actually also heading to Arizona for a hearing this week. And so I'll be seeing you there, Megan, and everyone else covering the trial.
Rebecca Lovelace, our friend, is asking when is the trial? Hey, Rebecca, we love having you with us. Lauren, Megan, when is the trial again?
So Lori has a status conference on Tuesday, and then jury selection is scheduled to begin on the 31st of March. Prosecution has said jury selection should take 2 weeks, but possibly 3, just because they don't know how Lori is going to behave during that, not really knowing the process and the rules. And then the prosecution has said they probably will take about 2 weeks to present their case, but we don't have an estimate yet from Lori on how long she thinks she will take. So yes, the fact she's representing herself is interesting, and she has been respectful of the judge and the process so far. She's filed several motions, all of which have been denied so far. I think Tuesday we're going to hear about the judge. The judge is going to rule on the motion about whether or not to allow Court TV to have cameras in the courtroom and to live stream the trial. So we'll hear about that on Tuesday, and then we'll hear the judge actually has denied all of Lori's motions so far to dismiss the case. And so we'll have to wait and see. I agree with you, Lauren. She has been even tempered so far, but knowing how she responded to Keith's questions, I think it's pretty likely that she could get activated enough that the judge is going to say, sorry, you're going to have to be reassigned counsel and you're not going to be allowed to represent yourself anymore, depending on how she goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does she want Court TV to be there?
She does not. She's very angry with Court TV. She says that Court TV has been exploiting her and her husband for a 24/7 commercial, and that Court TV is taking advantage of people and, exploiting them for the tragedies that happen in their lives. And now we know a little bit more insight on what she means by that. She basically is asserting that it's been a tragedy that she's lost so many people in her life, and that the media likes to twist it and turn it into crime.
Interesting.
Well, I promised all our super chatters that I would go through their questions or comments and share them. Hopefully I'll do it really fast. I want to remind everyone, please like this episode. We've got still 4,600 people joined. Please like this episode. Please comment on it. Please subscribe to Mormon Stories podcast. Please share this. It will really help get the word out.
I think only 2,000 people have liked the episode, and there's over almost 5,000 people watching.
Yeah. So please take the time really quick to like this episode. Gerardo's been doing some analytics, and he can show that likes and comments are what drive the success of an episode. Really quickly, Lauren and Megan and Gerardo, you've already given us 3 hours. If y'all want or need to drop off, I will let you do that now. Unless you want to stay on and respond to a few of these super chats. Lauren, do you need to run, or are you going to stick around?
I'll stick around for a bit. I might sneak out for a little restroom break, but I'll just
okay.
Yeah, but I won't. Yeah.
Megan, you're okay?
I'm the same. I may have to sneak out for a restroom break, but I'll stick around.
Gerardo, you all right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna do these super chats hopefully really quick, because we really appreciate the donations that make all this possible. So Destoni Salazar says Keith's body language was telling, seemed like he couldn't wait to leap out of his seat. And I'm going to ask you guys as panelists, just jump in if you've got responses, or I'll just jump on to the next episode. Troublemaker Baker says these are great observations for Megan. Also, I think Troublemaker Baker is also Broken Baker on YouTube. I'm told that Broken Baker, when he finished his own episode about this stuff, he pointed people in our direction. And if that's true,
Troublemaker Baker is actually a moderator on my channel, and it's a she, and she actually does have a channel as well, but it is Troublemaker Baker channel.
Got it. Okay. Well, thanks to Troublemaker Baker for her support. We really appreciate it. And also thank you to Broken Baker for their support. Really quickly, I told y'all that Nathan Hinckley was doing a service project and fixing up the home of Anna Schreier, the Assemblies of God / what's the term? Pentecostal, yeah. Story that we had. This is a photo of the chimney before Nathan's work, and I believe his son's helping him out, maybe his wife. This is them working on it. And while we've been doing this episode, this is them finishing the job. And then this is them outside. This is Nathan, and I'm assuming family members along with Anna Schreier there in the middle. Again, we're sharing this just as a way to share some light and some happiness in an otherwise dark episode. Want to thank Nathan. He's got a channel called The Bishop's Interview on YouTube. And we want to thank Nathan and his family for bringing a little light into the world. So thanks again for that, everyone. All right, we'll go back to the comments. Miss Mojo Rising says, do you feel she blamed Tylee and J.J. for holding her back, aka Lori didn't want to be an actor? I'm not exactly sure I understand. Other than Megan, it looks like Miss Mojo Rising is just feeling like Lori wanted more out of her life, and that maybe Tylee and JJ were getting in the way. What do you think about that theory, Megan?
Yeah, so she did want to be a model. She actually did some modeling in her late teenage years, had a portfolio and all of that. I don't know about her wanting to be an actor, but it wouldn't surprise me if she wanted to be famous. And I do think that there is an element in the relationship between her and Tylee where she was threatened by Tylee's beauty. She was threatened by Tylee's intelligence. And there is this Jungian concept of the devouring mother, the mother who refuses to allow their child to grow or to learn or to have their own dreams or their own life. And so the mother sort of hobbles their child's ambition and their self-worth and their self-belief so that the child doesn't outshine the mother. And I think that's probably a lot of what happened in Lori and Tylee's relationship.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's tragic and sad. I mean, I guess another thing is like religions sometimes really push people, and I'd say women, to have kids that maybe they wouldn't otherwise have or want to have. Maybe we shouldn't push people to have kids as much as we do, because maybe some people shouldn't have kids.
Some people should never be mothers. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And I think especially if there are people who don't want to be mothers, they shouldn't be socially pressured to be mothers.
Yeah, that's a really good point. All right, let's see. Troublemaker Baker says Colby's response to the Dateline interview is really interesting. He's a remarkable young man. Totally love that comment. S. Moore says, on his live last night, Colby mentioned how Lori blamed Tylee even before she was born, that they had a contentious relationship. So that's, wow. Colby mentioned how Lori blamed Tylee before she was born, that they had a contentious relationship. I don't even know what to make of that.
I think they're basically referring to the fact that, the whole time that Lori was pregnant with Tylee, she would talk about what a struggle it was and how hard it was. And so she blamed Tylee for lots of things throughout Tylee's life, and that they had a problematic relationship.
All right. Missy Ann, thank you for the super chat. Same to you, LCD. LCD writes, Nevermo from Berlin, Germany. Big fan of you guys. I love how you discuss these painful topics. I learned so much, even though this is far away from me culturally. I imagine, Lauren, that your channel, Hidden True Crime, is overwhelmingly non-LDS or never LDS.
Correct.
Have you ever done a poll to find out what percentage of your audience is either Mormon or ex-Mormon, or do you even know?
I don't know, but when it comes to the Daybell case, there's certainly a lot more LDS listeners than not, and LDS and wonderful, people, I think, with the same questions that I had, right? I think this is certainly a case that makes many of us wonder WTF, and we're trying to understand it. And when we cover this case, and when I say LDS, I want to say, maybe I should say Mormon, ex-Mormon, active Mormon, both sides of the spectrum for good reasons, and great conversation because of it when it comes to this case in particular.
How about you, Megan? How about your channel?
I honestly don't know. I suspect that it's probably, I suspect that not many LDS people watch my channel, just because I do offer a lot of criticism about the culture of the church and about the harmful doctrines of the church. I do offer, my opinion as an ex-Mormon, so I doubt that many Mormons want to tune into my channel, but I wouldn't be surprised. I guess I just don't know for sure.
I'm doing a poll right now just to see if our current audience, how much of it's LDS, former LDS, or never. Gerardo, you'll find this interesting. As of 233 votes, and I don't know how many is statistically significant, with the sample size of 4,400, but 78% are saying they've never been LDS. That's 3/4 of our current audience. 5% identify as LDS of the current audience, and about 20% are former LDS. So
I wonder
wow.
what the poll would be like if you asked Mormon instead of LDS.
Interesting.
Because that's a spectrum.
Yeah. Well, I think LDS, former LDS, or never LDS. I think that captures pretty much everyone. But I see what you're saying. Okay. We'll keep voting. Let's see if those numbers change. Amor of Alessi says Gerardo is sage. Now, what do you think, Lauren and Megan? What vote do you give Gerardo as like a alternate panel? I mean, we're never going to give up on Mindy. Mindy's not going anywhere. Gerardo, I'm sorry to tell you, Mindy's not going anywhere. But what's our vote for Gerardo as a rotating substitute or panelist? Do we want to raise our right hands? All in favor of Gerardo as a panelist? All in favor?
Well, I do have to say, if this is an audition for the band, Gerardo showed up to the audition without a binder, which is okay because that's Mindy's thing. I love Gerardo's insights and input, and from the very beginning, Gerardo, you've had some great insights on this case, and I really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you.
Did you notice Lawrence?
Gerardo knows the case. He knows the case. So
yeah. I was just kidding. All right, beautiful, Gerardo. Yeah, we agree, Gerardo. You're amazing. Tracy says, "Do you think Chad believes?" I think we already answered that. Is that right?
Yeah.
Thanks for the super chat. Susan Groom writes, "She told herself these things so many times. She believes all these visions and revelations." That's Susan voting that Lori believes her own delusions or lies. Care for JCYT says she can't be a bad person, so Tylee did it. That's speaking to this sort of narcissism idea that narcissists just don't take responsibility. They have to find someone to blame. Again, y'all jump in at any point. I'm just going through these.
Yep.
Sally Osling says she's met her grandchildren in the spirit world. Did y'all hear that one? I didn't know that.
Wait, what was that?
Oh yeah,
Lori,
my brain just kicked that out.
She told Colby that she knew about her grandchild being born, and that she.
Oh right.
Yeah, she's sort of similar to talking to Tammy Daybell and knowing what Tylee wanted and that she was happy. It's just like the same old. So yeah, she had relationships with her grandchildren too.
Yeah, she told Colby that she held her grandbaby and loved her, and that the grandbaby loved Lori. And I think that was sort of a dig to say, Colby, let me have a relationship with her. I already know her. I knew her in the, in the pre-existence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gerardo, you say you got to run, so no worries. We really appreciate you spending 3.5 hours with us on a Sunday.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. It was great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gerardo.
And Mark wants me home, but I promised our super chatters I would finish reading these. So I'm going to read them all. Take care, Gerardo. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
So Missy Ann says, Colby said after his reaction that he thinks something is visiting her, but not Jesus. I believe you can invite possession by things Lori did, like castings. So that's Missy Ann, and maybe Colby believing that she's getting deceptive demonic visitors that she believes are Jesus, but really are satanic visitors. And Joseph Smith's own revelations in Doctrine and Covenants allow for deceptive spirits to visit you. And he even gives you like a handshake test where if you're being visited by an angelic visitor, you should shake. This is literally in Mormon canonized scripture in 2025. Joseph Smith says you should extend your hand. If they shake your hand and you can feel a hand there, then they're a resurrected being. So they're a real, positive, good, resurrected angel. If you stick out your hand and they refuse to shake it, they're a good angel that hasn't been resurrected yet. So you should trust them because they don't try and shake your hand, but they just haven't been resurrected. If they go to shake your hand, but you can't feel a hand there, then you know that they're a demon. And that's the test according to Joseph Smith. And I don't mean to mock anyone's sacred religious beliefs, but like that's Mormon doctrine. Did you know that, Lauren? Did you know that was in the Doctrine and Covenants?
I've heard that. I think I've learned that from you in Mormon stories. Yeah. Another time. Or maybe somewhere else. Yeah, I think I've heard it. Yes.
Any thoughts? Do we think that Colby believes that his mom is being visited by demons, by deceptive spirits?
No, I don't think he believes that. He is Christian, but in recorded phone calls between Lori and him that they've even played in court, no, he rebukes her for, even kind of suggesting that she's getting visits from angels.
Okay. All right. Nikki Peaches writes, what do you all think of the use of temple images during the episode? Do you think the Mormon Church will put out a statement basically trying to distance itself? And thank you, Nikki Peaches, for the donation. I mean,
no, I think they've been silent on this case up to this point. I don't think they probably don't see any reason to jump in now and say anything at this point.
Is it unfair, Lauren, to as the resident Mormon, and I say that just tongue in cheek, is it fair that the temple images are included? Do you think that's smearing the church? I mean, wasn't Lori a temple worker up until the very end?
Yeah, she was. I mean, no, I don't think it's bad. I mean, I have a lot of beliefs in what the church should do PR wise. And I'm when I think that, I think of like what would help them. And it's making the temple a lot more public and open. So I don't think that's I don't think it's smearing the church to have pictures of temples and inside the temple. A lot was happening in the temple. So
yeah. I went ahead and closed the poll, but 74% of our audience today has never been Mormon. Something like 20% are former Mormon and 7% are active LDS. I love it. I love our active believing LDS listeners. I love your feedback. I love that you're listening. I hope you always feel respected on Mormon Stories podcast. A. Connors says, excellent discussion. Thanks for the super chat. A. Connors, Vala Hauk says, you look at how Charles Manson was able to brainwash his followers into killing innocent people and children without even being there themselves. So that's Vala just basically saying brainwashing is a thing and you don't need to be there to be able to influence people to murder. And I think that's objectively true. So that's just the dark world that we live in. Jump in, Megan or Lauren, if you've got anything to add there. Miss Mojo Rising says, I would like to see all the cutting room floor of the interview with Keith. Do you think it's just rambling, Lauren and Megan, or do you think there's good stuff? I mean, obviously, I want to see the full Lauren, Mathias, and Dr. John parts of the interview. That's the stuff that I'm most interested in because they're superstars. But do you think other than that amazing portion, do you think the rest was rambling and they would have included all of it if it was good? Or what?
I think it's probably fascinating to many of us, but I understand too, like Dateline is a storytelling platform. They have a story to tell. They can't just play 90 minutes of Lori Vallow and, or 90 minutes. I wish they could. It would be nice if they figured out a way to put more of it on their website for us to all watch and learn from. But yeah. And when I say learn from, I don't mean we're going to learn life lessons from Lori. I mean, learn what in the world could possibly, she was thinking.
Yeah, I found it was interesting when Keith pointed out that she was giving parenting advice and she was talking about her parenting style. But I think Keith also mentioned
about using love and logic, parenting
Love and
with love and logic. Like Margie read that book. I'm like, what are you trying to be like the perfect Mormon mom role model here? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Megan.
No, that's okay. I think she is. I think she's trying to still put out that narrative that she's a great parent. But Keith did mention in one of the interviews that he will be going on the Dateline podcast this Wednesday, and he will talk more about some of the other questions that he asked and some of the other things that Lori said. So maybe we'll get some audio.
Okay. All right. I'll have to check that out. Dog Mom writes, in my own personal opinion, I thought Lori sounded very much so like a Scientologist, not so much LDS. Wow, that's a hot take, Dog Mom. And I'm not going to say that's an invalid comment. Does that resonate with y'all that she sounds more Scientologist than Mormon?
I don't know enough about Scientology to know whether that's really accurate, other than the fact that, Scientology teaches that we have some kind of alien being inside of us that needs to be let out. I don't know.
I see things. I think that Lori Vallow's extremism, if you want my personal belief, comes from multiple places. Her Mormonism, but also some of her political beliefs, and some other kind of really strong extreme beliefs. And I think that there's a little bit of a hybrid thing going on with Lori and Chad that isn't addressed probably enough, in my opinion. I think that Leah Satili does a good job of that in her book. Addressing it, but I think there's certainly a lot more to this belief system, I'll just say, than LDS or Christian beliefs.
All right. Okay. Let's see. The next comment is from Lisa. She was wearing the ring in jail. I think that's Lisa. Just either she noticed it or she's surprised about it. But I guess they're talking about the makeshift ring. Is that what we're talking about there, Lauren or Megan?
She's wearing a ponytail holder on her ring finger. And, they reminded us, Melanie Gibb reminded us in the the Dateline interview, that there's no divorce for exalted beings. So she and Chad are going to be together for the next, how many forevers.
That's fascinating. It's still hard to believe that she really believes that her and Chad are going to be whisked away by Jesus before the death sentence. And I wonder if Chad will face the death penalty. Is that right?
That's right.
And if he does, I wonder if Keith will go back and interview her at that point and see what she has to say.
I hope not. Who cares what she has to say after that?
Yeah, that's fair. Jane Francis says the LDS Church is way past the time they should have condemned visions of glory. I think everybody on this panel would agree. Correct?
Yep.
And they still can condemn visions of glory.
It's never too late to condemn visions of glory. It's never too late to tell faithful, believing LDS members they should not be going to fringe conferences that are not supported by the official church. It's never too late for the church to come out and say, these people took our beliefs and twisted them and went too far. It's never too late for them to say anything that would prevent the harm of more people.
Yeah. Love it. Amen. Thanks to Lauren Sinkonen for her super chat. Jane Francis also writes, or possibly afraid of being declared dark themselves and next on the murder list. I don't know what she's referring to there. Do y'all know?
It was too long ago. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Jane Francis, for the support. I don't know this comment either. Artie Woodruff is saying dual poll on Alex Murphy's what? RT?
Retweet? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Sorry, I don't know what that is. We have a vote from some nobody that the band name needs to be Visions of Glory. Is that too triggering, y'all?
Yeah, no, thank you.
I thought that was hilarious.
It's funny, but I don't think we're going to stick with that one. I think we should be, based on the interview, on the Dateline interview, maybe we should call ourselves Jesus's favorite.
I don't know. I kind of like Visions of Glory because it gives some different SEO to. I mean, maybe it helps it though. I don't know. Like
redirects people.
Yeah, it redirects people.
Yeah.
Like wait a minute.
That's okay. I love it. Okay. Lisa says total respect for Lauren's work and her candor. And I think that also goes for Dr. John. Lauren, y'all are doing great work.
Thank you. Can I'm going to say something. I can tell a lot of people in chat. I mean, this is like same old. This is actually like for the past 5 years talking about what I believe or how they don't think that they can believe they can't believe what I believe, or that they believe this, or that I don't believe this. Reddit's got like whole threads on this. And,
you're like an apologist, and you're here to defend the church.
I can tell you guys this: nobody knows what I believe,
or no, what you don't believe, right? Nobody knows
Love
what
it.
you believe or what you don't believe.
Megan doesn't. No, just kidding.
Love it, Lauren.
But but go ahead, everyone. Yeah, keep speculating.
Keep speculating. Lauren, you have such a good attitude about the haters and the critics. You're having fun with them. You're not getting offended or hurt. Is that just journalist thick skin, or is that just your personality?
Probably a mix of both.
Okay.
And everybody in the chat is saying now it was Visions of Gory was the band name vote, not Visions of Glory.
I misread it. That's dark. We'll have to be like a scream death metal band if we're going to call it Visions of Gory.
Maybe we should call it Delusions of Glory.
Ooh, okay. All right. Emily Christina says, I just want to point out that people with mental illness are much more likely to be victims of crime than perpetrators. Chad and Lori are narcissists and use religion to justify their actions. Emily, that's a great point. I think it's mathematically factual. So thanks for sharing that, Emily. Thank you to C Peace for the super chat. Also, Raven Doll writes, just because she does not want court TV at her trial is not a reason that judge should allow them to film the trial. So I think she's saying it's not necessarily true that the judge should allow them to film the trial just because she doesn't want it filmed. Megan, as someone close to this, would you prefer it not be filmed, or would you prefer it be filmed?
I fight with myself about it because I stand by my statement that I wish, there would be no more journalists and no more cameras in the courtroom, because that's exactly what Lori wants, right? And I'm just going to point out too, Lori wants to be in control of the narrative more than anything else. And so she wants specifically for court TV not to be the ones to have cameras in the courtroom, but I guarantee you she wants cameras there. She loves the attention. She wants to be filmed and photographed. It makes it easier for people like me who can't physically be there for the entire trial if there are cameras in the courtroom. So I'm for it. I think it's a matter of public interest, and I also think that it's important for, as we're doing now, to speak up about Lori and her beliefs so that more people are aware and don't get duped and manipulated. So that's just my personal take.
Lauren, I know you've spoken to this a little bit already today. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I hope that there are cameras in the courtroom. There were not cameras for her last trial. There was audio only. In the fact that Lori tries to say that doesn't happen, that didn't happen. I would love for people to see the evidence firsthand and to know the truth of this. So I hope that there are cameras. And that's why I think I'm going to attempt to go to this status hearing. Actually, there's been a lot going on in my life too. Like, I have a flight tomorrow. I am debating. So I am still trying to decide if I am going or not, but I might be there. And that's one reason I will be there if I go, is I think I think it's going to be really interesting to find out if they are going to have cameras in the courtroom, and I absolutely hope they do.
All right. N4A writes, do you think the belief that Mormonism is the one true church is dangerous? Other Christian religions are not so extreme and exclusionary. Well, as the host of Mormon Stories, I would say yes, it's dangerous. But not just because it can lead to murder. Obviously, most Mormons don't murder, and most Mormons are, on average, really just nice, kind, smart, thoughtful people. But I think it leads to pride. I think it leads to judgment. I think it leads to hubris. And I think it deteriorates faith, because if it's an all or nothing, one exclusive true church or false, then when the church makes big errors like covering up pedophilia, covering up sex abuse, covering up financial fraud, then the members are like, okay, it was all or nothing. God's church wouldn't work this way, so I quit. Whereas if it's just like, hey, we're all doing our best, we're going to make mistakes, I think allegiance to the church can bend but not break. Whereas if it's so absolute, it has a tendency to break. And most ex-Mormons end up being atheists or agnostics and don't join any church. I think that these absolutist truth claims are fatal to belief overall, which some might say is a good thing, others may not. But Megan and Lauren, anything you want to add about the one true church claim?
I want to say, if you think your church, whatever your church is the one true church, if you think your one belief is the only belief, political, religious, if you think your guy is the only true guy, if you think your person is the only true thing, if you believe the Bible is the only true book on this earth, I don't care whether it's Mormonism or Catholicism or your political belief in a politician. If you think, to quote Christ, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man cometh unto the Father by me. If you think your way is the only way, take a look at yourself. And I noticed in that comment that they said that, like, do you think it's problematic that Mormons do this? Because other Christians don't, where, Christ said in the Bible, I'm the way, the truth, and life. If you think Christianity is the only way and that Christ is the only way that saves, that's a belief system of one truth. If you can't broaden yourself to think that maybe there's more out there, I hope that you might consider that.
Amen. All right. I think Megan already addressed this. I think Keith also addressed it. Cynthia asks, any evidence that Lori is smart at all? I feel like she was elevated based on pretty privilege and manipulation learned by the LDS. Megan, you would know best. Is Lori smart?
I think her level of intelligence has more to do with how she is able to get what she wants. So she's smart enough to, thus far, or at least prior to her arrest, to manipulate people to get what she wants. So that level of intelligence, yes.
Anything you want to add? Keith thought she was intelligent. Anything else you want to add to that, Lauren?
No,
Okay.
I think, yeah.
All right. Chantel Bukla says the band should interview Melanie and that we'll get the truth. Is Melanie Gibb doing interviews?
Well, she appeared on the Dateline interview, so yeah, she was.
Can we get her?
Old. That was an old interview.
Was it?
Yeah, that was an old interview she did for Dateline years and years ago. You could, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, same clothes, same set.
Do you think she'd do it, or is she just trying to disappear?
I think she's certainly trying to lay low.
Okay.
Yeah. She'll probably be called, don't you think, Lauren, to testify in this case?
Yeah, I think a lot of these people can't speak either. And so she will most likely be a witness once again in the murder trial for Charles Vallow.
Yeah.
All right, 3 more super chats, unless more come in. So Saipuaki Vikaupias sounds Greek. My ex also received revelation of my death. See, it's not just us. And we planned accordingly. Funeral prep, bucket list trips, upping life insurance 3 times, boob job. Why would you get a boob job if you know you're going to die? Coercive repenting to prepare me to meet my maker. That, I mean, you could look at that as being funny, but also you could also look at that as being sad and tragic. Regardless, I'm really grateful for that share and for the super chat. Y'all, why would boob job come into hearing that you're gonna die soon?
Hey, making the most out of life means different things to different people.
Okay. All right. No shade. Any reactions to that? That's just okay. I'll keep going. Sylvia Kranz says, Nevermore here. Thank you for your work. Love all your channels. And then finally, this may be the last super chat for the day. Lauren Peterson says, you can't be assigned a lawyer if you've already waived your right to counsel. Pro bono trials are called slow guilty pleas for a reason. I don't even know what Lauren's saying there.
I agree with, so we were talking about, I made the comment that if Lori went too far off base, that the judge could remove her right to represent herself. And that is actually true in the state of Arizona, because I researched it. If Lori goes too far outside the scope, or if she starts pontificating or testifying, or she's not following the court's rules, the judge has the right to revoke her right to represent herself. And she absolutely will be reassigned. She has advisory counsel, 2 attorneys that are helping her prepare her pleas and motions. And so those attorneys could be assigned to her or reassigned to her as representing her if she goes too far off the deep end.
All right. Oh, here we go. Look. John looks like garbage compared to just 6 years ago. Thank you, Huggy Bear. I appreciate that.
Let's see a picture of you, Huggy Bear. You now and you 6 years ago.
Hey, Lauren and Megan, you're not the only ones that get comments about your appearance. Sometimes,
right? I know. I'm actually over here laughing because I'm like, that's like really refreshing. I'm like,
that
yeah.
was for you. That was for
Finally,
you guys.
someone's not looking at our looks, commenting on our looks.
So you look like crap.
I think you look great, John.
Thank you. I just had to share that. All right. Well, they didn't even do a super chat. Okay. So thank you again, Megan. Your channel is Midlife Revolution or Third Verse, or even Megan Connor. You can find that on YouTube. Please subscribe and like her channel. Megan, anything you want to say before we wrap up?
You know, you asked a while back if there is anything that any one of us would ask Lori if we had the opportunity to interview her. And I think I used to want to interview her because I wanted to kind of know what was going on in her brain. And now that we have this interview, I don't need to, because I do see what she, where her head is at. But I think if I had the opportunity to ask her even one question, I think what I would ask her is, when are the times in your life that you feel genuinely guilty about something that you did that was wrong? And I would love to hear her answer on that. Because I think people who have narcissistic tendencies, people who have a lack of empathy and an inability to take responsibility for their own actions, that's a really tough question for them to answer, because it forces them to remove their mask, at least for themselves, and be introspective and examine their own behavior and say, when is a time that I really felt guilty about something that I did? When did I do something wrong? When did I do something that really harmed another person? They really don't have the ability to do that. And so I think that would at least be telling from the standpoint of, she would have to be introspective. All of that being said, I have no wish to talk to Lori at all. I think that the real Lori was gone a long time ago. I think that she is buried under her delusion, and I don't think she'll ever come out again. So I don't really have a desire to engage with her in any way.
Sharita Hall is saying, don't Megan, she will hurt you if she can.
She can't hurt me. I'm bully proof.
That's good. Heather Ruth says, how dare John look different 6 years later like the rest of us? Thanks, Heather. I'm not offended at all, by the way. I'm really not.
You look great, John. I know. I hope you, I want to say I was teasing you, but you look great. And then people are like calling me out. They're like, Lauren has a filter. And I'm like, yeah, I do. I have a skin filter on and I have Botox and I need it again. And aging is beautiful. All of the above. But you look great, John.
I love it that we're owning and just having fun. And Kelly J says, I love you guys laugh at trolls instead of getting mad. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Megan, you're amazing. I'm so proud to have you as part of the band. I'm so honored to call you as a friend. Thank you so much for joining us today. We love you.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. I'm so grateful to have this wonderful band to unpack all of this with. It really does help me heal. It helps me process. And I'm grateful for your supportive viewers. And Lauren, your hidden gems are wonderful and have been so supportive of me and my channel. And John, you've been a wonderful friend and mentor. And I owe a lot of my channel success to both of the two of you. So I'm always grateful to have conversations with you.
Hey, congrats on the 10,000 number.
Thank you. It's almost up to 11 now.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Lauren, what are your final comments or words? We're so happy you were able to join us today. And also, Dr. John's always welcome as a member of the band. He could be our Yoko Ono. Tell Dr. John he can be our Yoko Ono.
No, then he'll take Lauren away.
He'll break up the band.
John says hello. You know, we always have a hard time jumping on these things together because, you know, the idea is great to have, you know, co-host as spouses. You know, you do it with Margie, but we do have a young child and, you know, he's been out there all day, you know, taking, you know, parenting. So we're always having to, you know, do a switch. But I think we're actually just, you know, we're going to go on Patreon to talk about this, our thoughts. I'm going to dig into the psychology of Lori later with my husband, John, because he's a criminal psychologist for those that know or don't know. And he has some thoughts about this Dateline episode. We haven't gone public on our channel this week, but we'll be doing a Patreon episode at patreon.com/hiddentocrime. If you guys want to check that out, we're going to record later today.
Oh, cool. So you'll release it around when approximately?
I think we're going to release it tonight. So our Patreon episodes, we do audio only, and it's like behind the scenes, non-edited. We just like turn our phone recorder on. So we're like sitting at the table talking. It just, that feels easier. I have some personal stuff going on in my life. And so a lot of people have been asking us, my thoughts. We were going to go live last night. I opted not to. So what we're going to do is just do a very kind of simple behind the scenes episode where I ask John all my questions and to see what he thinks from a criminal psychologist's point of view, what he thinks about Lori's thoughts. So that's what we're going to do. It. We'll do something later on YouTube, but you know, we're taking a break right now. But I'm glad I could come on here. This was great. This was needed. And, you know, just so you know, John, I've been thinking about like what question I would ask Lori Vallow this entire episode since you pitched that question to me. I'm trying to like think of something super profound and, you know, honestly, you got me. Like, I think I would probably just like shoot the breeze with her and talk about makeup and chapstick and her life and, you know, what she thinks about politics and the way of the world. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess politics is pretty heavy, but I think what I'm just most interested in, I don't want to hear what she has to say. I guess I don't want any more of her excuses. I've heard them all. Like it's exhausting. I think I remain intrigued by her with just how she is as a person, like, you know, and maybe little slips or maybe tells, you know, slips of the mask or little tells that I might get from just shooting the breeze with her and being her friend, which sounds appalling and kind of contradictory since I said, I am so mad that Keith said that he was her friend. And I'm like sitting here saying like, I'd like to know what that would be like. I get it. hypocritical. But I think that's, that's probably what I would want to ask her. And honestly, and hopefully, Shane Bishop, the producer from Dateline, is listening, or Keith Morrison, but I've always been more interested in what Chad Daybell has to say. So, I don't know how easy it is to get into death row, but I am waiting, and I hope someone snags that interview.
I love it. All right. Well, Lauren, again, just like with Megan, we're just so thrilled to have you as a part of our channel. We wish, in your channel, you're about to pass Mormon Stories in subscribers, which, by the way, I'm thrilled about. So
I'm not.
Y'all are kicking butt. Y'all are totally kicking booty, and we're
That's
so
not
thrilled.
true. When I do surpass you in subscribers, I will let you know. I promise. I'll be like, John, boom. But that's not happening anytime soon. So it's not true.
Oh, well, in my mind, it's true. How's that? Really quickly, thanks to Sherry Williams for a last minute couple super chats. And then Maria writes, can you repeat the other channels, please? Yes, Hidden True Crime on YouTube. And there's also a podcast called Hidden True Crime. That's Lauren and Dr. John. And then Megan's has 3 names, either Megan Connor or Third Verse or Midlife Revolution, right? Did I get all that right?
Yep, you did. I'm shocked that you remember them all. It's kind of crazy.
All right. Well, y'all are the best. Thanks to all our viewers and listeners. Thanks to Maven and Julia that were able to jump on last minute on a Sunday. Maven for moderating, Julia for doing time codes and show notes and shorts. Thanks to Gerardo again. Thanks to Brooklyn that does our editing and some of our post-production along with Julia. Thanks to Margie and our respective partners for letting us, I don't know if everyone wants their partners to be named, but for letting us come in on a Sunday. Thanks to all our donors, Mormon Stories, that make all this possible. We couldn't do this without our monthly donors. We do pay Megan and Lauren and Mindy and Gerardo for appearing, and it's the super chats, but mostly it's just the monthly donations to Mormon Stories and the Oba Stories Foundation that makes all this possible. So thanks to all the donors. If you want to support this content, we lose donors every month. We can't do it without our donors. So if you want to see this content continue, we need people to step up, replace the people who cancel and back out, and become monthly donors. Just go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor. And that's how you keep this content going. You can also help us by liking this episode right now, by subscribing to this channel, Mormon Stories Podcast, and our respective channels, by commenting and by sharing. That's all super helpful as well. Thanks again to all our commenters. We really appreciate it. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast, Hidden True Crime, and Midlife Revolution. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.